Hey, reader, and welcome back to TMAT Talks. This is Centaur, your host tonight. I'm here with Wraithbert.
Hey, I'm here to sprint. Very dangerous over short distances.
There you go. And Tiberius is in the house.
Hello, hello.
And we're excited to bring you episode 4 on support in the Middle-earth strategy battle game. Now, that's right. We kind of said at the end of our last one we were thinking about doing snipers, if you don't remember.
But let's be honest, most people didn't listen all the way to the end.
That's exactly right. People pretty much turn it off right after we're done saying what the number 1 is and the reason why. So because of that, I figured as we were talking about it more, we really wanted to do the support one, give a little more time as we think through the snipers and take a look at those lists. And we're very excited to bring you this set. We also confessed as we started looking over our list and what we had chosen, the support category in the game is very broad. A lot of different things are encompassed by the idea of a support character. So you're going to find there's a lot of variance between our lists because of this. Not only because of user bias, what we find useful, what we don't find useful, but also because there's a lot of different things that one or two characters in the game do. And so sometimes we pick those characters. So because of that, we're going to do things a little differently in this post. We're going to walk through a couple of the honorable mentions who didn't make the top 10 very briefly, and then we're going to start releasing from number 10 all the way up to number 1 who takes each spot. So instead of giving you the full list right here up front, we're going to kind of take our time working our way up to number 1.
This would be a good time if you are playing along at home and have not finished writing down your list to pause for a second. We'll wait and then fill out your list and then see how we compare to you and see what's important. I actually didn't realize until we sat down to do this the biases I had that blinded me from certain choices. So we're curious to see what you have as well. Take a moment to do that for a second.
So, to start off our list of honorable mentions, earning 1 point, we have Lindir from Rivendell. He's a pretty straightforward choice as regards support in that he helps to give extra will points every turn to Elrond.
And resistant to magic.
Resistant to magic to people nearby.
Rivendell
So,
nearby.
it's a nice, small little support option. As somebody who's played Rivendell, I tend to find this very useful. I was apparently the only person who thought to put him on this list because there are a lot of really good choices.
And hence why he only has the 1 point.
Exactly. Sitting at 2 points is another character that I chose at number 9 with Thorin, King Under the Mountain from Erebor Reclaimed. So as you'll recall, Thorin in Erebor Reclaimed gives a benefit to the other members of the group who are within 6 inches of him. I tend to find this to be a pretty useful thing in concept. I myself don't play Erebor Reclaimed because I work for a nonprofit and don't want to buy the models. But from what I've seen, very useful bubble.
He's a very good model. I have played with him. I took him to one of our TMAT tournaments and ended up doing quite well with. I mean, it's very easy to do well if you take a lot of 3-attack heroes, which I did, and you run them with defense 8 dwarves, which I did. The one thing about the it doesn't take a whole lot of skill to do that. The one thing about his bubble, of course, is that as of now, at least, it only affects the champions of Erebor that are in the Erebor Reclaimed list. It doesn't affect your normal dwarves. If it did, that would be fantastic. But it does not.
Personally, I don't know. I mean, as I look at it, if your entire army at 750 points was basically the 13 members of the company in their heavy kitted out version, or at least as many as you could possibly fit in there, I think you do okay in most tournament scenes.
Oh.
Not like, you probably wouldn't be top tables, but, I mean, you do pretty well.
Well, I mean, the thing about those dwarves, this has nothing to do with supports. The thing about the dwarves is that they're all really high defense, and most of them are multiple attacks. And they're decent fight. Fight 4, I think, is where you bottom out all the way to fight 6. And, of course, you got some really... I think the whole thing kitted out, if you take all the guys, is 1,000 points.
It's pretty close to 1,000,
It's not going to be the largest 1,000-point army, but it will be, I think, the toughest 1,000-point hero army that you will face. 1,000 points in Nazgul would give them a run for their money. But anyway, at that point, if you're only running the champions or you have lots of champions, the banner effect is very good for them, especially because I think it would stack with the actual banner, but I'm not sure about that actually. Now it probably doesn't.
So I believe it's treated as a banner. So at that point, you'd be within range of more than one. For more info about this list, read my posts that compare Thorin's Company and Erebor Reclaimed. We're going to in-depth on each one of the profiles and stuff. The additional thing I will add is that you would probably want to include Dan in that list, but that's, again, diverging from supports a bit. But
I mean, Dean is in that list.
He is fantastic.
He does not, however, have Master of Battle.
Unfortunately not.
So tied with Thorin, we also have Radagast the Brown with 2 points and Angbor the Fearless with 2 points. So does anybody want to talk about Radagast and Angbor?
Well, Tiberius had Radagast ranked and I did not, so I will cede to him, and then I will talk about Angbor because I had him ranked and none of you had him.
Well, and he's pretty awesome for the record. I like Angbor.
Oh, yes.
We talked extensively in episode 2 about all the wonderful blessings Radagast the Brown has. He also gives resistant to magic to eagles when taken in Radagast Alliance. Take him on the sleigh if you need him to keep up. He is a fantastically glorious model, especially in an eagle-oriented army. He is also good on foot supporting other armies if you take him from like the White Council or something. But he provides really useful buffs, healing and immobilizing and knocking out horses and terror and stuff, being just a few of those benefits.
I generally tried to stay away from casters for the support list for the obvious reason that anybody who can cast magic is an excellent support piece. But I just trying to give highlight to more models. I sort of tried to stay away from them. There are a few casters that are in the list. Most of them they do something else aside from the casting. But there's an obvious one coming up that is pretty much just a principal caster. But Radagast is great. He's got a great selection of skills, spells, as we talked about in our spellcaster pod. I included Angbor the Fearless. He got my 9th spot, second to last from the bottom, just because in the same way that 6-inch Fury Bubble is really good. There are some armies where you won't need it. There are other armies where if you don't have it, it will absolutely kill you. Angbor's 6-inch Fearless Bubble is essentially the same thing. You can't channel it, obviously, to get the 6+ save, which is fabulous, I think. But at the same, by the same token, you don't have to worry about it going away if he runs out of will. He's got 3 will like most people do, which is a nice little surprise. But if he runs out of will because he's resisting spells, everybody around him in a pure fiefdoms list or a green fiefdoms list, all the fiefdom guys, and at a minimum, your clansmen of Lamedon are always fearless. And if you need to get into a fight with the Army of the Dead or terror-causing Angmar orcs or a Shade or Birder or what have you, the ability to get everybody into that is really good. And he's no slouch in combat either. He's got the I think he's got Mighty Blow, and he's got
he's got the strike,
he's got the broadsword,
he's got the strike,
he's got multiple might
points,
and high courage on his own, and I think he's fearless on his own also. So he's great for leading the charge, and he's dirt cheap for a hero of valor, and his clansmen are dirt cheap if you go with the clansmen as well. So even if you're not in a green force and you just got them conveniently allied to something else, being able to take up to 15, 16 guys who are fearless and will be fearless all the time as long as you can keep them alive is a really nice supporting piece to have in any army. Just the ability to tag terror-causing models, and oh, by the way, they also can kill those things in combat as well. So,
yeah, no, he's very good. We also have, as an honorable mention, we have Goldberry from the Wanderers in the Wild list. I chose Goldberry mostly because she does great area control. She allows for healing on your guys, also provides a benefit to the courage of your models when within range of her. So we talked about her a little bit on the spellcaster side of things, but we'll definitely refer to that side of the podcast. Again, it's not a particularly large or potent boost, but it is a nice one, and it does provide useful stuff from a support perspective. And then the final one on our honorable mentions is the Heralds of the Dead from the Dead of Dunharrow. Now, both Rythbert and Tiberius both had them on your list. What stands out to you guys about these guys?
Well, for me, I won't speak for Tiberius. For me, they were my last entry. I was sort of going back and forth on what to do. I do think, we talked about this in the Spellcasters pods as well, resistant to magic is an underrated skill. An underrated ability to have. It's always nice to have at least a couple of models in your army that have that, so if all else breaks loose, you're fighting multiple casters and they drain your will stores down. At least you got somebody who can put up at least a token fight against those Nature's Wraths, Wraths of Bruin, and if they come around, a Tremor. If you're out of will, the enemy can become more bold in their choices with will because they don't have to worry about you resisting stuff anymore. So they can spend more dice than they might usually do. And so if you have a model that can just always be around and do that, roll a die trying to resist. That's a good thing to have. No army would turn that away. So that's the biggest benefit for the. It's within. I should have the book in front of me here, but they give a resistant to magic bonus, which I will look up.
6-inch.
I think it's a 6-inch bonus.
Sure, it's a 6-inch buff.
Yeah.
But I like it because the King of the Dead is so good. The 6 will points are really good against a concentrated casting thing. You want that extra will point every time they try to cast, just to disincentivize them trying to nerf the King of the Dead.
Oh, right.
To me, that's where it's at. I mean, the overall global boost to fighting area of effect damage is great, but you really don't want someone doing a precision attack against the King of the Dead. Right. And so just giving that makes it worth it.
All right. So a little bit of cleanup. The Pennant of the Dead is a 3-inch range among the heralds, which again is a pretty large bubble, especially if you got them nearby. They don't count as a banner of the pennants, but they do give that resistance to magic. The other thing that I completely forgot about, I don't know why, is that they also, you can spend their will points as might points with the King of the Dead for doing calling heroic actions, which is valuable in and of itself in terms of support. The King of the Dead, if you're running a pure done hero, forces everything. He's your only source of might. He's your only source of moves. He's your only source of heroic combats or strikes or anything, marches, anything else that you have to do. And even if you're pairing them with, in the Legendary Legion, with Aragorn or Gimli or Legolas or all three, well, I guess Aragorn plus Gimli or Legolas, or all three of them together, because you have to take Aragorn.
Yeah.
The ability to have the King of the Dead, he becomes much more dangerous if he can strike more than once, if he can do heroic combats more than once, if he's got more or twice. Well, he's just got the one might point, right? So even a single herald will increase his availability to call heroic combats and heroic actions of any kind from 1 to 4. If you got 2 of them, that's 1 to 7. Now he's really dangerous because, of course, he's difficult to remove. Nobody really wants to fight him if they don't have to, because if they fluff and he wounds them, they're dead. So just the might points, the will that you can turn into might points, plus the resistant to magic is what made them valuable to me.
Gotcha. And that kind of brings us, now that we're done with the honorable mentions, to number 10 on our list, which with 6 points is Tom Bombadil from The Wanderers of the Wild. So, Wraithbit, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about why we chose Tom Bombadil?
Well, first of all, I object to the use of the word we. I was the only one that chose Tom Bombadil. I had him ranked 5. I think he should be much higher on this list.
He ranked very high for me in episode 2 on Spellcaster.
The support function for him, he supports your model in multiple ways, but the big thing that stood out for me is the Refreshing Song spell, which he can give. You can regenerate any stat of your choice, heroic stat of your choice, and wound as well, right?
1 point of might, will, fate, and wound.
And
so
wound,
you get
right?
All 4.
Yeah. So you get your selection of, what that is, which is really, really valuable. I think most of the time you always take the might point, unless
you get all 3.
No, I don't think that's. Yes. I don't think that's how it works.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it's a very, very nice ability. Yeah.
Really?
Really.
I mean, that's really powerful.
Really
this is why
the target immediately recovers. This is on page 99 of the rulebook. A single lost wound, as well as a single lost might, will, and fate point spent earlier in the battle.
Wow.
It also, this is the reason I like it, immediately recovers from the effects of any magical power they wish. So that's like, I'm no longer paralyzed, I'm no longer transfixed. That drain courage you have sitting on me, blow that away, right? Every single time.
With that in mind, I am shocked that he didn't make anybody else's top 10, especially since Goldberry made somebody's top 10.
Well, because they have the same support abilities, except Goldberry's area bubble is larger at 6 inches instead of 3 inches.
And
she makes my list, and I didn't want to give 2 of my spots to an army list of 2 people.
Tom is really good. He's a very good support piece. On top of the other stuff that he does, he shuts down combats. He can't be targeted by magic or shooting or anything. He can automatically win fights for you if you really need to. And he's got banishment in his back pocket. So if you're dealing with some of the nasty supports on the evil side that tend to be spirit models, your ringwraiths, your shades, your Barrow-wights, whatever have you, he can actually put up some pressure on them as well if you don't need him refreshing stats. Although, I mean, my goodness, if that does that, If Refreshing Song does all that, I don't know why you wouldn't cast that all the time.
I would like to point out that in our episode 2, where we talked about this, I made the argument that Refreshing Song is in fact the best spell in the game. Nobody agreed with me. Maybe we all change our minds now.
Hey.
I said it was very good. I don't know. There are some really powerful spells out there.
Yeah. A common theme for me, just to foreshadow a little bit, I don't know that everybody ranked this as high. Apparently not everybody ranked this as highly as I did, because nobody else had Tom in here, but I did give a premium to models that regenerate heroic stats in particular, because those are so valuable.
Yeah.
Resource management is a really important part of this game. And so anytime you have a model that can cheat those resource management shenanigans around, give you even more of an advantage. If you're really frugal with your resources and you have a way to regenerate them when you need them, you're going to have an advantage against a lot of opponents. So,
Okay. This then brings us to number 9 on our list, and this is Bilbo Baggins from the Lake Town Survivors /
No. This is just Lake Town Survivors.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because of course it's going to be different from, say, your Shire guy
The
or
old
anything else like
Bilbo.
that. Exactly.
So again, I'm the only one who had Bilbo on the list, which gets to the other thing that I really valued for support care. I feel like I'm monologue. I'm taking the time, but a lot of my really highly ranked models ended up very low on this list, which is interesting. I'll be curious to see. No, I didn't say that, but I'll be curious to see the rationales for everybody. I had Bilbo Baggins. This is the Bilbo from the Lake Town Survivors. You could, I suppose, also take the one from Thorin's Company. They're basically the same model, except that the one in Survivors of Lake Towns has way more heroic stats, and
it's one extra.
Also has the
right?
He's 3/3, and also has the Mithril Coat.
He does have the Mithril Coat,
which is a really big defense boost on top of the Sting, which I think you can take either.
Yes.
Either one can take the Sting. The big reason for him is twofold. One, he has a ring, and I believe I have all of the ring bearers, with the exception of Isildur, who's a sort of a special case, somewhere on my list for good and evil. The reason for that is pretty straightforward. The ring is a really, really, really powerful support piece. It can be difficult to use. There are some shenanigans with the ring that are sort of difficult. The big one, of course, is that most of the time the ring is on somebody who moves only 4 inches, and so they're not and somebody who's really fragile. So they're not really designed to be your A-level combat pieces. They are phenomenal supporting a very large combat piece in an army. If you have Aragorn or Boromir or Legolas or Gimli in the same fight as Frodo, if you've got Bard in the same fight as Bilbo, and they're in the same force, there is nothing you cannot fight as long as it's susceptible to the ring. You'll have a fight advantage against anything that is not susceptible to the ring as long as Bilbo has it. Bilbo got the nod. He's all the way up to second. I haven't ranked the highest of all the ring bearers because of two things. One, he's very high in the priority list for the ring. It is Sauron, then it is Isildur, then it is Bilbo, this Bilbo. And the reason for that is really, what that means in practice is that if you take this Bilbo, you are likely to have the ring pretty much any time. The only time that you would not is if you are fighting a pure Barad-dûr list, because if you're not running pure Barad-dûr, why would you take Sauron? He's a really big point sink if you're not getting all the benefits that come with him. His army's easy to break and all that stuff. Or you're fighting a Numenor army that happens to have Isildur, and Isildur, who has the ring, and Isildur cannot take the ring if you take Elendil in the army, and what Numenor player in their right mind is ever not going to take Elendil in their army? There are some, right? But that's, for thematic reasons, you do it. For competitive reasons, I really don't know why you wouldn't take Elendil. Elendil is fantastic.
I had to go say that because just today, at the day we recorded this, I had a post go up.
If you're doing the drinking game, is your first drink.
No, 2, I think.
It's
now.
the Last
Two
Alliance. Now. Elendil is a really good hero, but Isildur with the ring cost loads of points less.
That's true.
And you ally him in with Gil-galad or Elrond or Glorfindel, and they'll do just as much killing as, well, some of them will do just as much killing as Elendil will, but then you also have a ring bearer. So if you run into someone that you don't want to have to strike up against or whatever, you just walk Isildur in and right. I mean, just hack things apart. So
and like I said, for thematic reasons you would, but if you're running a pure Numenor list, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't take Elendil, right? So it would have to be that sort of Last Alliance thematic list, which Numenor plays very well as an ally with Rivendell in the Last Alliance. But I think the number of times that you'd see in Isildur and name your big elven hero with the ring versus Elendil and big elven hero with the ring, I think I don't know. I think people are more likely to take Elendil. That's been my experience.
I personally think that Elendil is a more popular choice too.
Yeah. So anyway, my point is that you are, unless you get those two niche lists, Barad-dûr with Sauron or a Numenor force that has decided not to take Elendil, you have a really good chance of taking the ring. The other thing that sets Bilbo apart is that when he has the ring, he is immune to the having to roll to figure out if you lose control of your model with the ring, which is the other big thing that can hamper ring bearers, is that you can lose control of the model. Bilbo just doesn't test. He doesn't roll for it. The wing is not awoken. He doesn't do that, which means you have full control over the ring bearer at all times. And so as long as you don't have a ringwraith somewhere on the table that is fighting you, you're in really good shape. And again, that ring, it allows you to move where you want. It keeps you safe. You're completely immune to magic spells when you're wearing it. You're completely immune to shooting when you're wearing it. You're very difficult to charge. And of course, if you can get into a fight as a supporting model with another big hero, it doesn't even have to be a really big hero. Anybody who's fight 5 is going to have a good chance against everybody but Sauron and the Balrog, and that's it, I think. Gil-galad would be the other one.
I will note that Bilbo ignoring the Sauron's will part of the rule allows him to to use heroic actions.
Correct, that's true.
So he can strike at fight 3 with an elven-made weapon. And so long as he gets a 3, he automatically wins. If he gets a 2, he rolls off with advantage against the likes of Sauron and the Balrog and anybody who strikes up to fight 9 or fight 10.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
He just needs to get a 2 on his roll. Just don't get a 1, and your strike is going to work.
Yeah, and that's because as I didn't realize until recently, if you're wearing the ring, you're not allowed to call heroic actions. Bilbo ignores that part of the ring's rules, so he can. And,
he is very good.
Yeah, again,
he probably should have made my list.
But Isildur doesn't need to most of the time, But even a heroic combat with a Bilbo who's got 3 might is valuable. And that's the thing, is that he's got the might plus the ring. You're not using him as a support piece, but he's got all of the sort of stats that you would expect, the heroic stats that you'd expect for a really big hero. Yeah. So, there you go.
In 8th place, we have, from the Shire list, Holfoot Bracegirdle. Holfoot, of course, is one of the new characters that came out with the Scouring of the Shire book. He was present relatively low on my list, relatively high, actually,
Number 4.
Tiberius's list. So, Tiberius, do you want to talk a little bit about Holfoot? Because, I love Holfoot, but I don't know he's number 4 out of 10.
Holfoot Bracegirdle fundamentally changed every single Shire army that is going to be played. My humble guess. Prior to that, prior to the Scouring of the Shire book, of course, coming out, there were basically no Shire heroes. Some of the most competitive builds were Gandalf and a bunch of Rangers, leading as many Hobbits as you could pack in. Holfoot Bracegirdle, though, provides a very large area where two-handing Hobbit sheriffs can two-hand without penalty. And for an army that is predominantly Strength 2, with possibly units that can be Strength 3, or Battling Brandybucks, Piercing Striking can get to Strength 4, the ability to two-hand at Strength 2 is really good. Defense 6 shield walls used to be the worst, right? Because even your Strength 3 Battling Brandybucks or normal Hobbit militia with axes that Piercing Strike were still wounding on 6s. These guys can run up against a Defense 6 shield wall and just, okay, if I can win, I win on 5s. And that's really good. That's like being Strength 4. And that's really powerful. And for 35 points, he's a bargain. He's a really good bargain. It means that for the same cost as a normal captain, you can pair him with one of the many heroes who counts as a banner. You got,
Willfoot,
Frodo of the Nine Fingers, right? And just have those guys, if you're not already allying in with, Halbarad, who's got the 6-inch banner and all that stuff. And you can also pair him with people like Lotho Sackville Baggins, who can make all those Hobbit sheriffs fight for 4 turns during the game. So it's a really powerful guy, and because he's not one of the named Hobbits, you can run him with either the Hobbits as they come, or you can still ally him in with the Gandalf and Rangers list that people were running before. He's a really simple add and greatly increases the power of a very critical part of your army.
The one other thing I'll mention about him too, because it's useful specifically within a Shire list, I'm kind of our resident Shire player here at TMAT. He has access to Heroic March, which in my mind is a very critical support ability for armies that don't have captains. And he happens to be one of the guys that does.
If only he could get more than 1 might point.
If only. That would be really nice. There are ways, technically, for him to do that. You unfortunately can't put him in a list with Bill. That would just be
but you can ally him with Tom and Goldberry.
Yes, you can, but that's expensive. In any event, I don't feel like we need to talk too much more about Holfoot.
Well, I want the record to reflect that I don't have Holfoot Bracegirdle on my list. I'm just curious, so the rationale for him as opposed to, say... I have a difficult... Yeah, just Bilbo is the thing. I have a difficult time seeing why this... I mean, this is a 3-inch bubble, right?
Yeah.
Two-handing without penalty is fine. It doesn't help you with big heroes. It doesn't help you, with all the things that the ring helps you with. So I'm just sort of curious what the rationale is. Because both of you chose Holfoot over Bilbo, and I'm curious about that.
Tiberius, you want to go first on this one?
So, all of the characters that I chose in this have these kind of area of effect benefits and stuff. And the question I asked, there's a lot of heroes, of course, that have area of effect benefits. The question that I asked for these kinds of characters is, how important is this character to the army that they're being used for? Bilbo is a fantastic, especially in Lake Town where you don't have a lot of good heroes. Bilbo is a fantastic character. He is going to affect whoever he walks into, right? I mean, and yes, he can call heroic moves, right? I mean, he can call heroic combats for Bard, right? I mean, or Gandalf, or whoever else you want to run for that. That's all great, but you can drop, like Holfoot into an area of the board that you need to hold, and lots of people will benefit from his boosts, and not just anybody, but the closest thing you have to rank and file soldiers. So he'll make those people, the people who have the greatest chance of doing actual damage, to be better at what they do. So that's why I put him there. I think he's more critical to a Shire list, almost essential nowadays to a Shire list, than other support characters are to the list that they're in.
Even though he's only affecting 5 or 6 guys?
Especially since he's only
the Hobbits don't have any spears or anything.
Yeah. Well, they have a couple. You have a Gaffer,
right? But none of this affects.
Spear.
None of this affects spears, right? His special bonus ability.
That's correct. Yeah.
So realistically, it's 5 or 6, unless you're fighting in a circle.
Yeah. Caught together with the pitchfork. So here's my beef with ring bears, because, by the way, none of the ring bears made it onto my list.
Yes,
just so
I know
we're clear
that.
on that. I'll say that for the group. So first of all, part of it, I'll admit, is user bias. I have rarely used ring bearers. The few times that I have used them, I've not been particularly impressed. Granted, it was Frodo Baggins from the Fellowship, so I haven't used Bilbo before. Okay, so I'll caveat that. Again, going into the workability of it, first of all, a ring bearer may turn out not to be useful against an enemy army. I mean, obviously, I could pick the easy army option on this one, which is Barrow-wight, right, where Bilbo doesn't even get the ring, but I'm not going to pick that one. But a similar sort of army, if you're facing a Mordor army where you've got, say, the Witch King and a Mordor Troll Chieftain leading a whole bunch of orcs, 80%, 90% of the guys on the battlefield, sure, I go invisible, I reduce the person's fight value by half, but it's an orc, I didn't care, it wasn't necessary, and the other guys are going to run so much faster and get into places where your 4-inch Bilbo isn't going to be able to keep up. So there's just a lot of logistical differences where, sure, on paper, theoretically, the ring bearer bonus is useful. In practice, I have not seen the ring bearer actually contribute extensively to critical elements where they were up against the big bad, going in there and committing heroic actions against them. Whereas a person like Holfoot, and really the people that took the top 5 from my list, anywhere they are against any enemy that they're up against, they're providing a useful support element to a variety of people. It's always dependable. And I understand some people are going to see it differently. I admit, again, first and foremost, I think it's just user bias. I don't tend to prefer ring bearers, but that might just be me.
Well, I mean, that's a fair preference, I suppose. It's just, I'm curious. Have you played with them since the Fellowship buffs came out in the new edition? Because
I played with Frodo since the Fellowship buffs came out. Then again, in the campaign that we were doing it in, it was primarily low fight value people anyway. It was like fight 4 or less, so I didn't see a huge advantage in doing it. So.
For more information about the usefulness in the ring in combats, even against grunts, check out our post where Reithbert brought the Fellowship against my beloved Isengarders and stuff, and you'll see Frodo either slipping the ring on or taking the ring off and stuff. There are benefits to it. I think Frodo is a really good ring bearer. I think Bilbo is a really good ring bearer too. He just didn't make my list. Yeah. He probably should have, but he just didn't.
Yeah. Well, I think Frodo is the next on the list, right?
He is.
Frodo
Yes, number 7 is so Frodo Baggins of the Fellowship. So you guys want to talk a little bit about...
I had him ranked 3rd for similar reasons to Bilbo. He's behind Bilbo because he's got fewer heroic stats. He doesn't have the full 333. You do have to test for him for the ring, and that's something. I really think when it comes to support pieces in an army, 6-inch banners are nice, and bubble effects are nice, and 3-inch bubble effects are nice, and even regenerating stats is good in and of itself. But if you have the ring, and you don't always, and that's the other reason why Bilbo is slightly higher, is Bilbo is more likely to have the ring. Just because if somebody has a Bilbo and somebody else has a Frodo, the Bilbo has the ring. At least if you've got the young Bilbo.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the way that the hierarchy works.
Even old Bilbo gets it before Frodo.
Right. So, but if you have the ring, unless you have a specialty piece in the army, which is a Nazgul, right? And there's only, there's a lot of factions that have access to Nazgul. Not every faction that has access to Nazgul takes them. Even factions that do take Nazguls, you have a force that is fighting a Nazgul. The Nazgul is only ever in one spot, and if you keep the ring bearer where they should be, which is near your big Fight 6 hero, a Nazgul doesn't want to go anywhere near a Fight 6 hero. A Fight 6 hero is, with the rare exception of the Nazgul who can strike or who can copy stats, and there are some of them, but for the most part, Nazgul doesn't want to go anywhere near a Fight 6 hero. A Fight 6 hero is very dangerous for them, especially if you can strike. Even if you can strike, a hero with an elven-made weapon. Aragorn comes to mind, of course, with the Fellowship. If you take Andúril with him, even Gandalf with Glamdring, who has an elven-made weapon. I mean, goodness, even Frodo, if he's got Sting, you've got an elven-made weapon in the fight. If you're supporting somebody like Gimli, you've got ways to get around their fight value. Even if you got a Nazgul that strikes, you can still. The ring puts so much pressure on that Nazgul to be where the ring bearer is that all of a sudden they're off their game. A Nazgul usually doesn't want to be anywhere near a big combat hero. They want to be in the back. They want to be trying to disrupt stuff. They want to be trying to buff troops. They want to be giving out banner effects. They want to be giving out poison rerolls and stuff like that. If you got a ring bearer on the force, the Nazgul has to do something with that ring bearer, and their options are limited. They have to engage with it in some way. Now they can shoot them with spells, right? They're not bound by that. But typically what that means is, you try to transfix. The ring bearers typically all have really good will pools and resistance to magic, so that's not a sure bet. In a Fellowship force, of course, if you got Frodo and your ring bearer is suddenly under attack from a Nazgul, well, Gandalf has a solution for that. Just pop Protection of the Valar on your ring bearer. Now the Nazgul has to engage the ring bearer in combat or ignore the ring bearer who's running around with your big hero. So I think they're an underrated way to change the way that enemy Nazgul play. And if you don't have an enemy Nazgul, you don't have to worry about it. As long as you got the ring, there's nothing else that can be done. The big troll chieftains that you're normally worried about suddenly look a lot smaller when they're only fight 4. Any captain, any generic fight 5 captain now has an advantage against them. So I think, again, as support pieces, they're really, really good. And Frodo in the Fellowship army gets a lot of buffs. If you keep the army bonus now, he's fearless. He makes the rest of the army fearless. So,
and keeps you from coughing up points.
Right.
being broken.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's alive and on the board.
Exactly.
Which is the number one driver that put him on my list. I didn't have him as high as Rathbert did. I had him at number 6. But, yeah, I mean, just the ability to not cough up points in any game is huge. And in certain games, like To the Death, where a lot of your victory points are, well, did you break your opponent and did they break you? If you go down to 25 after having cut through enough of his army to break him, and Frodo's still alive, you've won the game. You know, and that's really cool and it's really powerful. And all you need to do is keep this 60 to 85 point model alive and on the board.
Right.
And the ring will help him do that for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Tied for 5th on this, we have 2 characters that provide somewhat similar effects in that they both have 6-inch bubbles. The first is Frodo of the Nine Fingers from the Shire, or the Defenders of the Shire Legendary Legion, and Malbet the Seer from Arnor. So beginning first with Frodo of the Nine Fingers, he was present on both my list and on Tiberius's list. Tiberius, do you want to kind of lead off what it was that put him higher on your list than Frodo from the Fellowship list?
So this is the same. It's the same reason that I have Holfoot, right? So Holfoot's number 4 on my list. Frodo the Nine Fingers is number 5. Frodo Baggins is number 6. You want all 3 of these people in the list that they're in. And the question is, so how critical are they? Shire has no spears. You need banners. Frodo is the largest banner that you have, and it's the only banner that stays alive regardless of heroic stats. Will Whitfoot can give you a banner bonus, but it costs will, and he only has a limited amount of will. Frodo just counts as a banner, right? And that's a really cool thing where you can just plop him down, on a pony. You can move him around. You shift him along your battle line to wherever needs it to make sure that, okay, we're going to go for it and we'll get a reroll, right? If we don't get high enough. This is a really cool and useful model. He also, he's got kind of meh heroic stats when it comes to it. He can pop Heroic Resolve, which is a neat way to get 2 free dice on all of the models in your army that are nearby him. So pretty resilient against magical damage as well. I put him marginally above the Frodo Baggins from the Fellowship because, again, Frodo will affect... He does provide battlefield-wide buffs to your team. I think there are Fellowship lists you can run without him. I'm not sure that I would, but you can. Whereas, I think Frodo of the Nine Fingers, unless you're running Gandalf, I think Frodo is an auto-include for Shire armies.
Well, and kind of adding on to that, just so we can make sure we say it for the purpose of the podcast, 6-inch banner radius, which is excellent. The fact that all models within 6 inches treat him as a banner, but he's not actually a banner, means if you really wanted to, you could lay him down, and he's still giving that benefit, he's still giving that bonus, which is not true for other banners. We're going to get into this later, so we talk about Malbet the Seer. Frodo, unlike other iterations of the character or others, is always going to be giving this benefit to everybody on the table. But more than that, he's hardly ever your actual army leader, because that's probably going to go to Merry or Pippin, as they're higher tiered heroes. They're both heroes of valor, he's only hero of fortitude. Which means if you were to lose Frodo, it doesn't mean as much as if you were, say, to lose Frodo Baggins from the Fellowship list. Right? In that sense, he's more expendable, which from a person who plays Shire, I think within the context of, okay, there's a very decent chance I'm going to lose this character, right? Because your highest person is going to be defense 6. Most people are going to be defense 3. So you think within that context. But also similar to why I ranked Holfoot Bracegirdle where he is, you need to provide a multitude of threats. And the beauty about Shire support is the fact that, yes, in a one-on-one, somebody will always find, what is the utility of this? The utility is that there's 5 or 6, 7 people you all have to deal with, and they're all going to be providing exceptional benefits for your team without the opponent being able to simply remove them all at once, right? Whereas, for example, if, I don't know, no, well, we're not going to compare to other stuff. But you get the idea. Frodo of the Nine Fingers, I ranked him pretty high because of the fact that he's an absolutely essential element of the army and provides a very necessary benefit that's useful really for any force that could have it. A 6-inch banner radius would be really nice. And I didn't feel like putting all of the 6-inch banners on the top of the list. So, you'll notice LSR does not appear on my list for any of them because I just didn't feel like putting him on everything. Any thoughts from you, Rathbert, about these 2 guys? Well, about Frodo of the Nine Fingers.
I feel like I've been a downer. I don't mean to be. There's a lot of great models in the. So just because I don't think that these are, I don't think these models are better than other models doesn't mean they're not great. the concern about Frodo that I have, this particular Frodo is sort of twofold. One, he is literally just a 6-inch banner, and maybe if you need it, some magic defense, because he can't charge and he's unarmed. So even if he's in a fight, he can't make strikes, and he's -1 to his duel roll. He's only got a point of might. He's only got a point of fate. He's not all that resilient. I'm not sure he's the best support model in this army. I think Mary's got a decent argument with the +1 or 2 courage that he's got and the ability to upgrade your guys, and any number of the new Hobbits as well. I think add stuff that's more valuable. So he's not my favorite model. A lot of that is, again, as we talked about with in other pods, unarmed is a real big penalty, and I feel like, at least a lot of these other support models can do something else. They can fight, they can contribute in a fight, they can do something that's valuable. They take up space, they can, gut a big hero that's fighting you. I did not give, I don't know that I have any. There's one 6-inch banner effect character that made my list. Mm-hmm. And apart from that, I was like, 6-inch banners are nice, but I felt like there were other abilities like rings, like refreshing stats that are more valuable. So that's why.
Sure. As a slight counterpoint, but not really a counterpoint, because all of that is very valid and very true. Part of Shire mathematics for how to run an army is that you never really want a one-on-one. That's really not how Shire is designed to work. And so the way I tend to use Frodo is that since he's not a fighting character, he makes an excellent 2nd or 3rd rank character, and his 6-inch banner radius definitely helps a lot with that. But he also works a lot for area control and denial, because since I can't charge him, I'm not going to willingly remove his control zone, which means the enemy is going to have to work around that control zone or engage it, which is fine, at which point I keep other models close enough by that Frodo should ideally not be in a fight all by himself. But again, that goes into advanced tactics into how to use Shire, so I can understand why somebody looking at it would say, this guy is not going to do all that well. He's not contributing to anything other than a 6-inch banner. I don't know. I tend to see, though, there's a decent bit of Hobbits that are benefiting from that 6-inch banner. So
no, that's certainly true. The 6-inch banners are good. They are very good. And the area denial is a thing. I've used a fellowship with Build a Pony. That's essentially the way that you use Build a Pony. He's there and he fills up space, and he's there to buy you some time, and you sort of position him strategically. I guess my thought, though, is that you typically only employ that strategy for models who can't fight. If you have a generic cavalry model who can fight, you would not typically say, well, I'm going to use this model as an area support piece, to deny you some space. That's not your first priority, your first option. If you can't move the model, you don't have room to charge or whatever else, or you're concerned you're about to be overwhelmed and you can't press your advantage on that flank, then you might. But it's usually not your first option. But, again, like I said, I did not rank 6-inch banner. A 6-inch banner on its own was not enough to make my top 10, and that's my rationale. The fact that he was unarmed put him further down the list of 6-inch banners that did not make my list.
All right. Tied with him is Malbet the Seer from Arnor. This is one of, I think it's the first character on this list that we all had on our list, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
So a little bit about Malbet the Seer. Tiberius, you had him at number 10.
I did.
Wraithbert, you had him at number 8. And
I did.
Had him as number 1, okay, to give you an idea of how varied this was. So maybe you guys want to talk a little bit about what was it that detracted from Malbeth that put him on the lower half for both of you guys?
It was his army.
It was almost entirely
his
army.
And the fact that he's a one-trick pony. The models that are ahead of him on my list, some of them we've talked about. Frodo is more than a one-trick pony. The ring is a big deal what he does, but he's also got stats. He's incredibly durable. He's doing other things for a fellowship force if you got a pure army. I had Tom Bombadil ahead of him. Tom is refreshing your stats. He's picking off fights that you don't like and automatically winning them. He's dealing with spirit models that you can't deal with otherwise. Malbeth is just the 5+ save. The 5+ save is great. I'm a fan of 6+ saves, so of course I'm going to think a 5+ save is great. I'm the only one who's a fan of 6+ saves categorically, as you know, if you listen to our podcast on Evil Spellcasters. But it is only 6-inch range, and which I guess the Fury Save is 2. And it only affects your Arnor models, which is not every model in an Arnor force. And he's not remarkably great. Like, he's not good at really anything else other than providing the 6+ save, because he doesn't help you resist magic. He's got some will, it's not a lot. He doesn't give you any shielding against archery, which is the big thing that will pick him apart if you're not careful with him. Yes, you could lay him down. Yes, you could hide him behind a wall, but he's like any other sort of 6-inch effect guy, in that you can avoid him if you just stay away from where the 6-inch effect is and fight somewhere else.
Yeah.
So,
if you look at the two big things that detracted from me from Malbet is that, one, he is a vulnerable character. Unlike a lot of the other people we've talked about, I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, Holfoot Bracegirdle is pretty vulnerable too, but like Malbet this year, it's not that hard to get wounds on him. Whether you're charging him or casting magic or shooting him, it's really not that difficult. The 5+ save will work. It will do work, and it will keep him alive. And if he saves his might point to boost one of those rolls against him from a 4 to a 5, that could be useful. But he's fragile in a way that the other heroes we've talked about in the main are not. Holfoot is half his cost, so he better be more fragile, in my opinion. The other thing that detracts for me is that you can take Hobbit archers again in Arnor, which is phenomenally good. Hobbit archers are not Arnor units, and they are, without a doubt, the most vulnerable units that are in your Arnor. They're in your Arnor list. And if you're going to run Arnor at anything that is above like 400 points, you need the numbers because you don't have anything else going for you. You have one of the most limited profile lists in the entire game, and so you have to bulk out the numbers. And what better way to bulk out your numbers than having lots of rows of shiny spears and shields and buckets and buckets and buckets of hobbits. 2/3 of your army will benefit from, this Arnor bubble, as much of it as you can cover with that 6-inch boost. So you can make a nice anvil so long as Malbet stays alive. But the whole rest of your army is going to have a really hard time staying around. Really hard time. So there's that. Do I think he's essential to a list? Of course. That's why he made this list for me. He made it just barely. He's number 10 for me. But it's really because he while he provides good things, it's very limited how he can apply it.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, he's my number 1. And granted, in older editions, for example, he was a lot stronger than he currently is. His 6-inch benefit was to all allied units as opposed to just Arnor units. The game was very different in past iterations, but I still like Malbeth, and I still think he's one of the strongest supports for a couple reasons. First of all, because, it is basically free fate points for every single model that's of the Arnor list that's within 6 inches of him, which covers an insanely large amount of the board. 2, and going back to something that Tiberius mentioned earlier, just from a list perspective, he offers one of the, I would argue you can probably survive without Arvidwi if you really needed to. It's not easy, but you probably could. It's very hard to survive in Arnor without Malbeth. Malbeth is a big part of the reason why you would collect the army over and against just going across the, across the seas to Numenor and grabbing a Numenor list, which can do everything that Arnor can do except better. And so because of that, I know I tend to find that to be particularly useful. I find that since their army special bonus isn't all that great, and they have convenience alliance with groups like, like Khazad-dûm, for example, they provide an excellent, hey, we'll provide spear support for your dwarves, and then you can just Khazad up all the way you want to go. And so, there's just a lot of utility there that they get from having heavily armed, very durable spearmen that can hold their own. Granted, they're courage too, so, you got to be careful of that. But Malbeth is a lot of what helps to make it durable. The fact that he offers a 5-up fate save, basically, also means that he can really deter heroic actions from taking place anywhere near him. And if you really do get close, he does have a staff, which can bash if you really wanted it to. And he's got Fight 4, Strength 4, which is really not that bad for a 70-point hero.
It's Fight 3, Strength
3. Oh, is it really?
Fight
okay.
3, strength,
yeah.
So, is he a combat hero? No, but, obviously this is a support category, right? So, when I'm looking at it, honestly, chance at 1 in 3 wounds being ignored, I mean, we could talk about hiding him behind stuff and all that if we really wanted to. I don't feel like we need to for the sake of saving time. But I don't know. I think that this is a very unique, very helpful upgrade, and it's not something that relies on exhaustion, right? So whereas a bunch of the spellcasters out there who are going to be higher on this list and do a great job, while a lot of people may have useful support abilities, a lot of those people, if you can wipe out their will points, which Nazgul can, then you remove the ability. But Malbeth's ability is forever and ever until he dies, right? So
I do think, similar to what I said about, this 5+ save, again, I just want to reiterate, 5+ save is really good. I do think I would be tempted to rank him higher if there were more heroes who could take advantage of it. Because the 5+ save on a troop is good, but you will fail it 2/3 of the time, and if you fail it on a troop in Arnor, the troop is dead because there are no multi-wound troops. So it is still, even at a third chance, which is a good chance, it is still less likely to occur than to occur, than to not occur. It is still less likely to occur. It is more likely that it will not occur.
There you go.
Is what I'm trying to say. If you had multiple heroes, and I guess you could, right? You could take the captains, I guess, and Arvidui. The other thing too is that, again, like I said, the 6-inch effects are good. I do think in many cases, though, realistically speaking, a 6-inch bubble is probably getting 14 models that are actually in danger. It's whatever you can fit in the front rank, because spear supports are not in danger of taking wounds unless they've been tagged and you're being surrounded, in which case I'm not sure a 6+ save is a 5+ save is going to save you, because then you're probably trapped and you're probably taking 4 dice to wound, and you've got to roll 4 4s to save you, 4 5s to save you. If there were more heroes who could take advantage of it, I think I'd rank it higher. And again, it's for me, it was a cut below heroes who could completely nullify other big heroes with their support abilities, and it was a cut below support models who could replenish stats. So, but it's a good ability.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the best ability.
I'm not going to dwell here. I do find it interesting that you would say there's a better chance it won't occur than it will, and yet you still stand for 6-up Fury.
Yeah, no, I agree.
For our listeners, I'd really like to hear how that plays out.
I'm about setting realistic expectations.
Yeah.
A 6+ save, as I said before, is still unlikely to occur, but it is more likely to occur than if you don't have a save.
Right.
Which is my point.
And a 5-up save is twice as likely to occur.
I agree.
A 6-up save.
But I think but a 5+ save is less likely to occur than something that's certain. Angbor's bonus, courage bonus, always occurs. You always get the automatic courage bonus. Now, I had Angbor below Malbeth, just below Malbeth. Frodo's ring, if you have the ring, the ring bearer's bonus always occurs, with the exception of those certain niche circumstances that we talked about. And unless they're running an army of all ringwraiths, you can usually play around with that, unless the ringwraith manages to charge you and all that sort of stuff. Tom Bombadil, if he casts Refreshing Song, you're always getting all 4 of those stats replenished.
Until you run out of will points.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Which does take a
and Malbeth's ability works until Malbeth dies.
Sure, but I mean, and
Malbeth is much more likely to die than Tom is.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
no, he
Tom
is.
has what? Tom has what? 15 will points,
correct?
Right, and if he's charged or gets involved in combat, he loses 1.
But you can't charge him.
But he can charge, and that's a big reason why you use Tom.
You have full control over when Tom leaves the board.
Yeah,
which is not. No, you do. If you don't charge and you don't cast spells and you're down to 1 will, there is no way that anybody can make Tom leave the board.
That is true. I guess at that point, though, what is he doing?
He's standing within an inch of a guy, covering with his control zone, so you can't charge him.
All that you can do eventually with Tom or Goldberry is deny pretty close to a 9-inch bubble
of area.
9 square-inch bubble through 3-inch diameter. That's basically all that you can do. Which in many cases is not going to be what you want in the end game. It is better than nothing.
Yes.
But
that's after you've cast 14 refreshing songs and regenerated an ungodly amount of heroic stats. So anyway, all I'm saying is that for me, I agree that, both are unlikely is my point. right? 5+ save is unlikely. A 6+ save is more unlikely, half as likely as it turns out, which is why I have Malbet and his uncertain benefit ranked below other models that have more certain benefits.
Yeah. Well, anyway, tell us what you think down in the comments section.
And also why I don't have any Fury Shamans with 6+ saves ranked high as support models. Yeah.
Gotcha. But yeah, we're going to move on to number 4, so we can wrap up here on the Forces of Good side of things. Number 4 was Bill the Pony from the Fellowship. Now, Bill's interesting. He got about mid-range on all of our lists. No matter which way you cut it, we all thought, right about the middle of it, you should find Bill.
He's good.
So what do we like about Bill the Pony?
He replenishes your stats, just like we were talking about. In an army list that already has so many stats to chew from. This is the thing about Bill, right? Bill is a 5+, right? So it's the same thing, right? It's a 5+ to regenerate stats. Is that right?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, you got the book open.
Yep.
The thing about Bill is that it only has to go off once or twice, and all of a sudden your Legolas is fully repowered. He's back up to his 3 might, or your Aragorn's got multiple might, or Boromir's got his will point back, so he can't be blasted by Saruman anymore, or whatever it is. Apart from the sort of cool factor, and he counts as a banner. So again, sort of multi-use models. He's a banner for your hobbits. He's an option to replenish your stats. And again, I ranked him 6th, which was behind the ring bearers, behind Tom Bombadil. He does a similar thing to what Bombadil does, in that he allows you to replenish stats. His is less certain than Bombadil's. Bombadil's is also more powerful. That's why I had Bombadil ahead. But Bill's a great model, and he's a rock star of any Fellowship group. Let's be honest, he's the star of the Fellowship.
While regaining heroic points is good, the thing that does it for me is that he counts as a banner for the worst models in a Fellowship list.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone except the Hobbits are well kitted out to defend themselves when against reasonably bad odds, right? And he is the one thing that can make Merry and Pippin, if they're running as left and right wing guards for Boromir, he is what will make them actually keep people off of Boromir, so Boromir can focus on killing things without the fear of getting overwhelmed, especially by being engaged by high courage models. And so having him around is good. It's really, really useful. It also does that area of deniability, which most of the members of the Fellowship just aren't able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that to be really good.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned him supporting the Hobbits when they're off on their own. He's actually, in many respects, more dangerous if he's within range of a Hobbit who's in a fight with a big hero. Because all of a sudden the big heroes they're in a fight that counts as being in range of a banner. So if Aragorn is fighting with Frodo, and Frodo has the ring, and Frodo is within 3 inches of Bill, not only are you getting the benefits of the ring, which means it doesn't matter what they do, whether they strike, whatever, Aragorn has the higher fight value, but now Aragorn, if he rolls 3 2s, can re-roll one of those dice because his fights counts as being in range of a banner. He gets the 4, or he gets the 5, or he gets the 6. You get your free might point to spend on top of and you already know you're going to win the ties. It's as close to a sure thing as you can get. And if you got the Elven-made weapon Anduril on him, even better.
Even better.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. As we move into the top 3, number 3 on this list goes to Halbarad with the banner of the Even Star from the Rangers list at 21 points. So there was a little bit of variance again as to how we ranked them. So Tiberius, you had him number 3 on your list.
Ding, ding, ding.
I had him number 2 on my list. And Wraithbert, you had him number 7 on your list.
I did. I had him behind the guys who regenerate Will and the Ring Bearers, and one other stat, one other guy we'll talk about.
That we'll talk about a little later. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about this guy because I think it's quite clear as to why we like him. 6-inch banner, fearless bubble along with that. I mean, he's basically the best that you can get with Frodo, the best you can get with Angbor, except even better because it's all friendly models within that radius.
Exactly.
So,
and it's on a ranger.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very good model himself. Yeah. He's fight 5. He's got the 2 attacks. He's got defense 5.
5. Yep.
He's got a bow if you need it. He doesn't count as having a banner for purposes of combat, so he's got no minus penalties to anything. I had him. He is the highest of the banner models that I had because it's the combination of 6-inch banner plus that fearless, which again you don't need it all the time. If you need it, you need it. Well, of the banners that do 6-inch stuff.
He is also a historical ally with the Shire.
That's right.
Which means you can put a 6-inch banner with Rangers of the North supporting them right there. And because they're historical allies, you don't need the valor requirement, so you could just drop Halbarad and a bunch of Rangers to attack Rangers to support and buff out your Hobbit battle line. So you have that on one side. You got Frodo with Holfoot and Lotho on the other side. Beautiful day. Beautiful day.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing that is probably worth mentioning about Halbarad, too, is you can put him on a horse, which is pretty important because it means not only do you get a pretty decent killing hero already with a good bit of might and the banner reroll guarantee, you also get potentially the charge bonus, and you can get him around to wherever you need.
And a slightly larger radius.
Exactly.
He's 3 might with strike. There's a lot that's going for him, so he's really good. And but if we're talking about the support piece, again, like I said, I really like support pieces that do more than one thing. So giving a banner reroll plus the courage makes him really valuable.
Sitting in number 2, we have Círdan of Rivendell at 23 points. This guy was at least 5th place on anybody's list. At maximum, he came in number 1 on your list, Tiberius.
And I would like to point out that prior to February, I'm pretty sure we all would have had him at number 1 or number 2. The nerfs that came out changed him quite a bit. I still think Círdan is the best support character in the game. Full stop. Good or evil compared. I think he's the best. Just because of the range of things he allows your team to be able to do. Do elves need to be able to pass all their courage tests? Well, they pass most of them as it is, but it's nice to have, right? I mean, is it great when elves cause terror? Absolutely, right? Is it nice when you protect them from getting sniped? Heck yeah, right? I mean, is it nice when your hero gets to re-roll any failed things that they get? Absolutely, right? What else do you want? Right? A banner? Do you want him to be a banner? I mean, that's really the only way he could go up.
He could go up that way.
He could go up that way.
He could be armed.
That would help.
That would help too.
Yeah. He could have a ring.
He could have his ring.
Have a ring of power.
Yep.
He could be fortitude again.
Yep.
But come on. I mean, we don't have to beg too much on this guy. He's really good.
He's got 4 fantastic spells. They are sort of the epitome of support spells. They're the sort of they allow you to do so many things. None of them are really offensive. None of them are some of them are defensive in nature. But he can protect you from archery. He can boost your damage. He can make you cause terror. He can help you get around terror. There's not really, again, multi-use models, things that you can get multiple things out of. He offers you a lot, not just support, but a lot of support. I did downgrade him slightly, given the changes to him, just because he is much harder to bring into armies now than others is. Certainly, I mean, Halbarad is sort of... No, Halbarad's a hero of fortitude now.
Yeah,
so
too,
isn't he? So he's fortitude.
Yeah,
but you can bring him with Aragorn if you need a valor to ally, or Arathorn if you're on a budget.
That is the thing about these heroes, these supporting heroes, is they are mostly
fortitude
or under. Fortitude. Yeah, so they are actually sort of difficult to transplant.
I think Thorin is one of the few that we have, and he was
Thorin is, mention. And
Radagast as well.
Right, so. Bombadil is immune, obviously. Yeah.
So my one concern, and the reason why Círdan didn't make my top 3, is that one, some of his really, really good buffs are on a 5-up, and he's not a heavily minded character. We talked about that a little bit on the Spellcaster post, so we don't really need to go too heavily into it now. If it was closer to certainty, then I would totally have him in my top 3.
You sound like me now.
I mean, in some respects. I'd say a 5-up to get off a spell that will probably only last 1 turn is different from a 5-up any single time somebody takes a wound. But
I agree. It's my same argument for 6+ saves with Fury. How the more you can use something, right, the more certain it becomes that it's going to proc, right? But I do think you're right. There is something to be said for. There are supports that you have to work for, and there are supports that you just get, right? The 5+ save bubble that you get from Malbet, the bubble itself you always get as long as Malbet is there. The 6 the fearless bubble that you get from Halbarad. You always get, as long as Halbarad is there. The things that you get with Círdan are not set. Blinding Light is about as close as you can get. It's cast on a 2+, right? His Blinding Light is cast on a 2+, and then you've got a range of spells, right? The Aura of Dismay is very difficult to cast. Fortunately, he gets the free will point per turn, which makes him quite a bit more reliable. But he's there principally just to cast. He's not really doing anything else for your army. So I think that's a fair consideration. The difficulty to cast. And again, you won't always need the Aura of Dismay. A lot of times it's a luxury you don't need. If you're fighting other elves, I wouldn't bother with it. Certainly not if you've got anybody. If you've got anybody who can do Wrath of Bruin, and you're probably better just holding your will in reserve, not blowing a will point or two to try to get the 5+. To do it. But there's other armies that it will absolutely wreck their day, particularly if they don't have a support model in their force to help them get around the terror that you'll cause.
Yeah. So, and then this brings us to number 1 for the forces of good on our list with 24 points, which is Gamling with the Royal Standard of Rohan. So
I am going to point out, looking back over this list, not to be a broken record, I do feel disappointed that I did not put Gandalf the White somewhere on this list. But I feel like, given the other boosts and stuff, I'd really be just trying to advertise for my boy. So I'm going to just...
He's the top tier spellcaster. That also means he's a top tier support model.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
For those of you who are listening and are yelling
where
is Gandalf?
Yeah.
Well, listen to our...
Right. We're trying to...
I have a couple as well that I regret, but we can talk about that after.
Yeah.
We should give Gamling his day in the sun because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we are trying... I think we did mention up front, we are trying not to always be talking about the same models every single time. So we're trying to spread it out. But yeah, I mean, Gamling, obviously, he's really good in that, at the start of any turn... heroes that are nearby can regain a point of might. Can't take them above their maximum, but it does allow them to regain one if they've lost one. It obviously counts as a banner. He's not treated as having a banner for the purposes of suffering the penalty toward his dual rolls. You can mount him, of course, so he's great in an all-mounted force. He's great in an infantry force. I will mention one slight concern, which is why I didn't have him in my top in my top 5, because he came in 6th for me. And it goes back to the fact that this is a 3-inch banner, not because 3-inch banners are bad, but because, especially in an all-mounted force, which is a lot of the competitive Rohan forces, it's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's the problem for me. And so while saying, an additional point of might, that's really great. For starters, it's any Rohan hero, which granted for a number of legendary legions, they make it so that, in Helm's Deep list, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, they count as Rohan, right? For the purposes of special rules. And, in various others, they're allowed to count them. But in this case, it's any Rohan hero models that are within 3 inches. So the number of people you're helping is going to be constricted. It's going to be a smaller group automatically. The fact that if you're working with cavalry, they're on 40 millimeter bases means that even though it's 3 inches out from his base, that's going to be 1, maybe 2 models to either side. So, I guess if you're smack dab in the middle, you could hit a good number of people, but then Gamling isn't fighting, and he's a pretty decent fighter, all things considered. So, I just feel like it's great. I just feel like for a 50-point banner, being one of the more expensive ones, you're not actually getting as many might points back as you'd initially think. And then, of course, what happens if one of those guys within range rolls a 6 to win the duel, rolls really well on all of his other stuff, so he doesn't need to burn any might that turn, right? Then there's other guys within the bubble that aren't affecting it. Heaven forbid you should have a random warrior within the bubble, too. So there's just a lot there that could be great, is great in certain circumstances, but could also turn out to be not as useful as it looks on paper.
So that's all true, and that's a fair consideration. This is only a 3-inch banner. It is not a 6-inch banner. So again, if you just count the banner effect in and of itself, I don't think he'd be a top-tier model. I do think, while your concerns are true in theory, and if you haven't practiced with a Rohan cavalry model, cavalry army, you will find it is more difficult to do than you think. There are plenty of people who have taken Gamling to tournaments building a force around him, and then very well. So it is, yes, you have to. It's something you have to play around with, like any sort of bubble force shades and any of that stuff. You are telegraphing to a certain extent because you have to start the turn within the 3 inches of him for the ability to kick in. I do think most players who run that army would tell you that getting the extra might, even if it's only 2 or 3 per turn, you're at a minimum getting 1 because Gamling is always within 3 inches of himself. And Gamling can call heroic defense
Fill in the
and
blanks.
moves at
Marches.
least. I think he's got march as well.
Yep.
So you're at a minimum always getting 1. I think most armies would say, look, this is the reason why people take Aragorn. Look, at some point in the game, you are going to be out of might, and I'm going to have some. And that is worth way more than whatever the cost is to bring in this model.
And especially for a cavalry army.
Correct.
Having might when your opponent has run out is huge.
Correct. Right.
It's absolutely huge.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think again, all your concerns are true, and they do make Gamling more difficult to play with than he sort of appears. So everybody reads it and is like, "Oh, infinite might! I'm going to have like 10 might per turn coming out of him." Well, that's probably not realistic. Again, managing expectations, but I do think most players are happy to get 2 or 3 might per turn when their opponent is spending 2 or 3 might per turn.
Well, from my perspective, look at it this way. What is the number one problem with Rohan armies? They're capped at fight 5.
Right.
Why? Why are they capped at fight 5? Jay Claire, why are they capped at fight 5?
No. Don't call down the wrath of...
But the reason why Gamling, in my opinion, is really good, second only to Círdan, is that you have to strike. Your army has to strike. Strike is not a great heroic action because it's not guaranteed. But when you're fight 5 and you're facing opponents who are fight 6, if you call a strike, they will eventually, unless they're Aragorn, they're going to run out of might. Mm-hmm. And eventually you will strike up and you will beat them. Yep. Right? And that's useful. And if you can do that on a turn when you're on the charge, even better. Right? Yep. So in my opinion, you take Gamling, not because he is the best character, not because he's the best profile, not because he's got the best banner. You take him because if you don't take him, you will regret not having him at some point in the game.
And I had him number 1. I had him number 1 because, there are actually a surprising number of characters, support models that can help you regrow your stats. He's the only one, I think, who can regrow multiple stats on multiple models on the same turn. Not multiple stats on the same model, but he can replenish 2, 3, 4 might points. Tom Bombadil cannot do that. It's one time. Build opponent cannot do that as one time.
There are other people that didn't make our list, like Oyen or Bombadil.
Right. Yes.
Can regrow
correct. They can regrow certain stats. Yeah.
One person.
I guess the exception again. The exception to the multiple ones would be Alfred, but again, Alfred is a single model. So you're not in the fully optimized. If you get Gamling in the middle of a bunch of infantry, Rohan heroes and captains, you could get 15 guys, 15 might points in a single turn if you needed to. You're not going to do that again, setting expectations realistically. 2 or 3 is realistic. Yeah. And that's enormous to go, when you've got 3 might points and they're spending 3 might points a turn and you're getting 3 might points a turn, you are going to be ahead of them on resource management.
And it means that at the beginning of the game, your heroes can march divided, and then once things get going, they all fight concentrated, and so they all run out together or nearly at the same time, and then they're all just working together, and your end game is moving that ball around so that they can go do what they need to do.
Now, one important note, so the rule only kicks in when you are out of might. When the heroes are out of might, which means, ironically enough, Rohan is sort of incentivized, if Gamling's in the list, to burn through their might as quickly as possible. You don't want to be sort of wasteful with it, but it does mean they're sort of hyper-aggressive right out of the gate. They are heroic moving right out of the gate. They are heroic shooting sometimes right out of the gate. They're marching and shooting right out of the gate if they've got a kiting force built around Rohan riders and outriders. But they can do that because, like a Fellowship force that has Aragorn, or a Gondor force that has Aragorn, or an Army of the Dead force that has Aragorn, you can afford to do those sorts of luxury things, what many armies would consider to be a luxury. Oh, I'm going to move and shoot after marching. I'm going to burn 2 might points to do heroic march and a heroic shoot. They can do those sorts of things because you got the might coming, as long as you can position Gamling in such a way where you can replenish the might once it runs out. So, yeah. Cool. Okay.
A quick, 5-minute thought. Looking at it now, are there people that you wish had made it onto the list?
There's at least one, besides Gandalf, that I wish I'd put on the list. I'm sure that most of our UK friends are asking where Boromir is.
Yes, that was going to be mine. He should be on this list.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is that I don't view him as a support character. I view him as a killing thing.
Who happens to have
be able to support people.
And can make Osvet's higher fight value.
Good.
Yeah. No,
I can't justify omitting him because I went on and on and on about 6-inch banners that do other stuff, and it turns out that's the obvious exclusion. And I had him on the list, and I'm not sure where he fell off, so I'm gonna put him on the list. I'm gonna put him. So the hard part for me, I do think he would be no higher than. Where do I have Bombadil?
5.
I got Bombadil at 5.
At 5.
I don't think he'd be any higher than Bombadil. So he's probably at 6. I go back and forth between him and Halbarad in terms of which is the best of the 6-inch banners. The Fearless is really, really, really good. Unless it doesn't matter, unless you don't need it. But even then, I'm sort of the opinion that Fearless is always good, even if you don't need it, because why take the chance? The fight bonus from Boromir is really, really good. Less good if you're fighting something that's fight 5 with elven blades. So in the niche cases that you hit elves, it sort of drops down. So I think I would probably have Halbarad's banner. This is not Halbarad the model, better than Boromir the model, but in terms of their support functions, I think I'd have him probably, I guess, what would that be I'd probably have him at 6 ahead of Build a Pony. I don't know. I'd think about that.
The only other model that I was looking at and was like, I'd really like to put him on the list is Oin the Dwarf, Champion of Erebor. And the reason is because you can put him in a list with Balin and Gimli and the King's Champion. And the one thing that those dwarf heroes will really make your opponent mad about is if they're regaining wounds. Trying to kill them is hard enough, but if they say, oh, well, you only dealt 1 wound to me, I will save my fate, I will take a wound, and Oin, get over here, I need it back, right? It's just rude. It is rude what he can do for the heroes that he supports, and it is healing, which is rare. But, who am I going to kick off this list? Am I going to kick Radagast? Heralds of the Dead, maybe?
Yeah.
Right? At a point, you're looking at the list and you're like, well, healing dwarf heroes is great, but I'm not sure I can justify kicking any of the other models off.
Yeah, and obviously...
And I don't even have Bilbo on the list.
Yeah,
right? Bilbo's
Bilbo's
right there on the cusp that probably kicks the Heralds of the Dead off the list anyway. So is he better than Radagast? I don't think so. So he's not going to make my list.
Yeah, and obviously we said we were trying not to reuse all the same sort of stuff. I kept coming back to Galadriel on my side of things with the whole people within 6 inches of the mirror can restore their fate value to its starting value, right? So, but how many heroes are you going to have within 6 inches of that? Which you got to bring onto the board and stuff. You're not going to.
Well, but again, if it's just one, right? Exactly. That's the thing, right? That's the thing with anybody who replenishes stats, which is why I valued it so highly in my rankings. At some point, even if it's a fate point or a wound, in Oin's case, at some point, if you run out of fate and you run out of wounds, you die, and that means the piece goes away and you don't get to use it anymore. And so even if it's just a single model that's replenishing 1 fate point or 1 will point, or 1 wound, you're getting some value out of that I think is more valuable. It's contributing something. If nothing else, the fate point that you're replenishing, or multiple fate points if you happen to have a hero who has multiple fate, at a minimum, there's no guarantee, we talked about 6+ saves and 5+ saves. There's no guarantee that a 4+ save is going to go off. But what it does is it introduces uncertainty for your opponent. If they are striking, they're entering combat and they're trying to figure out, am I going to spend might to win a duel against your hero? The calculus, I think, is different if your hero has no fate points versus your hero has 3 fate points.
Yeah.
And so even for something small like that, like Fate, even if it's a single model each turn, even if it's not even each turn, if for those critical moments of the game you have an influx of stats that your opponent doesn't have, that's an advantage for you. And even if it's just one model, which is why, again, the banner that affects multiple models is sort of that on steroids. Yeah. It's you get an influx of stats when everybody else is spending. So yeah, I think she's good. She's good. I had a thought as well about the other Galadriel, the one that's not a dedicated spellcaster, but she's got the 6-inch automatic blinding light. As well as transfix and something else, right?
So she's got banishment. She's
got banishment, right?
Fear on.
Instill fear too, yeah.
4 up, 3 up,
yeah,
something like that.
So she is
and she's got Fortify Spirit, which is so good.
Yeah, so I almost think
and a mini Harbinger, 6-inch -1.
Yeah, the more I think about her, I don't know why she's really not on the list.
I don't know.
She does.
She should be on the list.
You're
talking me into someone else.
I think she's better than Círdan, just the way that you're describing her, just because she contributes most of what Círdan does. Right? She's got the blinding light, which is the big spell. She's got Harbinger, which is not cause terror, but it's minus terror. It's -1 courage, and the banishment, and the fortify spirit, which is dedicated magic resistance. So
she is not better than Círdan. She supplements him.
I know this is your. There we go. Yeah, I know.
Number one combo. Spoiler alert! They're the number one combo because she applies a courage debuff, but she doesn't make the people around her cause terror. He does. So together they are better than either of them individually. Right?
But
but vulnerable to magic.
Right.
She can keep him from losing his last will point, which would keep all of the stuff from disappearing.
But
so good
with your position that they are clearly the best combo.
Yes.
I assume she should make the list. That Círdan is not so much better than her that he makes the list and drags her in the top.
You are absolutely right.
Yes.
I have erred.
So have I. We have all aired.
I do not know where I
all overlooked her. So,
but she would probably be high.
We'll have to do it. Yeah. No, mea culpas. Yeah. This is. There's so many models to choose from
and they all
that do so many different things. It's hard to. It is really hard. So again, like we talked before, give us your thoughts in the comments. And I might do a re-ranking after this, just based on it.
Maybe I'll think about it.
We've had enough. Boromir, I feel like, is much better than the Heralds of the Dead. I think Galadriel is much better. Both Galadriels are probably
Should I mention Thranduil's 3-inch make your guys higher fight value 6-inch banner for cavalry thing?
So again,
it's so niche, it's just not worth talking.
about. My position on 3-inch banners. Unless you're replenishing stats. The +1 to wound is fine. 3 inches, it's. He's so expensive. He's so expensive.
Okay, well, good. Then we don't have to talk about Thranduil.
But automatic R of dismay. That's something too. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the forces of evil. Welcome back. We are here now to talk about the forces of evil and the top 10 supports here. And again, we're going to give the same caveat that we gave to the last discussion on the forces of good, where there's frankly a lot of good stuff to talk about here. There's a lot of good models that GW has created for us to be able to play with and to use. We have also intentionally stayed away from using people that we heavily highlighted on the spellcasters list. So, you will obviously see some spellcasters on here because they're great and they do a great job. But, we intentionally wanted to give a few other models a highlight. Okay, so because of that, just know that up front, yes, Saruman is great, and yes, the Balrog's great, and yes, other people like that are great, but we're intentionally trying to shift around the list a bit.
Yeah, with the obvious caveat again, a top-tier spellcaster is always going to be an excellent support piece. So this is not to denigrate any of the top-tier spellcasters that we talked about at length in the previous 2 episodes. These are other models that are primarily doing some other stuff. We do have some casters. For the most part, though, I think all the casters that we have, certainly on the evil side, and for the good side as well, for the most part, with the exception of Círdan, are contributing something else to the army besides the casting.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
So in this case, we're going to begin with a couple of our honorable mentions. Getting 1 point, we have shamans, just as a general catch-all various armies term. So Tiberius, you've put shamans on here. Anything in particular you want to say?
I'm actually removing my vote for shamans. I am going to make the same note I made the other day that says, when you need the shaman, you need the shaman. Mm-hmm. So they are useful. I'm actually taking their vote away from them, and I'm giving it to somebody else. So, yes.
Okay. Well, that person's going to have the same number of points. So do you want to reveal your...
No, actually, because it changes the ranking.
Oh, never mind.
I broke a tie.
Oh, you broke a tie.
To be interesting, I broke a tie.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm curious here.
And threw the shamans in the corner.
Does Centaur know which tie you broke?
Yes. Okay. I just saw it.
And it will probably make him very happy.
Yes, no, I am very happy. I mean, obviously, I'm happy with whatever you choose, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Great.
Appreciate that.
So I guess we won't talk about shamans then. We'll talk a bit about the Tainted, who got 2 points. He's from Angmar and Mordor. Wraithbird, you want to talk a little bit about him?
Yeah, so I had the Tainted ranked 9th. The Tainted is he's your average ringwraith when it comes to casting. He didn't make my list of the top 10 spellcasters. He does, however, have 2 very interesting rules that sort of help with the sort of support role. The number 1 is he has Harbinger of Evil,
which is huge.
Which in an Angmar army, if you keep the army bonus, makes that terror on orcs is really good. Your orcs are even better if they are supported by a model that gives Harbinger of Evil. Now, the Witch King will typically do that for you in an Angmar force, and the Witch King is a much better model than the Tainted is, just because he offers a lot more flexibility. You can customize his stats. He's got a better range of spells. He casts a couple of those spells better. The obvious one, I think, is Instill Fear that he casts on a 4+. He's got spells to deal with wizards. Your staff is broken if you need to. He's got the Crown of Morgul if you need it for rerolls. All that great stuff that we talked about. If for some reason you can't have the Witch King, or more commonly, if your Witch King is somewhere and you have another front, you're fighting over more objectives or something else, and you've got your orcs, and you don't have a Barrow-wight around or a Shade around to give them terror, the Tainted is an excellent second choice, a fallback option. He's got a pretty good supply of stats, 2 might, 14 will, 2 fate. He, again, can cast if you need to. He's got the option for all 4 of the mounts, including the armored horse, which is not for all of the shaman. Not for all of the ringwraiths. The other ability that he has, in addition to Harbinger, that's really important is the miasmic presence. We talked a lot about heroes, support heroes. A lot of the support heroes that I really prioritized are support heroes that allow you to regrow heroic stats, including might. The big reason for that is because if you have might and the other side does not, you can do heroic actions, heroic moves, heroic strikes, all that other sort of stuff. And the other side cannot, and there are any army would really benefit from having might when the other army does not. Miasmic Presence allows the Tainted to shut down about, it depends on what heroic action you're calling, but in certain circumstances, for the big ones, heroic moves, heroic combats, 50 to 90%, sometimes more, of what that heroic action would usually be able to do for you, because it prevents you from calling with me's, whatever the one is for heroic march. If they're within
at the double
6 inches for you, right? All that stuff, heroic combats. It prevents you from the hero can still call those actions. They can still perform those actions, but warriors cannot tag along. Right. Shuts down those big heroic moves. I mentioned this before, I think, when we were talking about Angmar. Angmar as a terror army doesn't really care about moving first as much as a lot of other armies do, because in some ways, if you have terror army, you actually would prefer to move second in some respects, because if they got to move first, they got to decide if they're going to charge you or not. They got to deal with their courage test to try to charge you. If they fail, they're frozen. You can then tag them or ignore them at your leisure. You have a lot of advantages for moving second. In the odd turn that you do move first, the Tainted allows you to sort of rub your opponent's nose in it. Well, now you don't get to call heroic actions or whatever else. It also works if you're going, if you plan to call a heroic action, if you've positioned the Tainted in such a way that you can, and I think if this kicks around, so you have to declare it at the start of the move phase, right? Before heroic actions are declared, but the 6-inch bubble of non-movement doesn't kick in until that heroic action actually occurs. So there is some room. Ideally, you would sort of anticipate it, right? You'd be like, I'm gonna move the Tainted over here because this is gonna tag all your heroes, and then maybe if I really need a heroic mover to move first next time, I move the Witch King somewhere else where he's outside of the bubble, and you can play around with it in that fashion. So it takes some maneuvering. You do have to be careful. You would obviously not want to call any heroic actions that want to move troops with the Tainted if you are also declaring miasmic presence. But it allows you, it's a very sort of interesting support that can, in combination with the Terror, completely shut down a lot of what some enemy armies want to do. So, I think it's good.
I am a huge fan of this rule. It is important to note that because it only affects warrior models, you want to be careful against those hero balls like Gamling surrounded by a bunch of Rohan heroes. Because Gamling may just call a heroic move with the intention of moving 2, 3, 4 other heroes, slamming into stuff, and it's like, well, okay, I didn't bring all of our Rohan Royal Guard escorts. Fine. Okay. They'll follow later. Right, and so there's always that concern. But for most armies, you're not going to have all their heroes clumped in one place. Yeah. So.
And then obviously the obligatory, Thorin's Company, Fellowship, Rangers of the North, where they don't have any warrior models, and so they're obviously going to be problematic. Yeah.
Let me add another caution, just so this doesn't surprise you. So the rule is that the warrior models are not allowed to take part in heroic actions. I believe what that means is that since they aren't allowed to take part, the hero, even if they how does this work? If you've got Gamling who's calling a heroic action and he's like a heroic move and he says with me, because there are other heroes around them, the heroes obviously have to make a choice. They have to move or they forfeit their move for the rest of the turn, because that's the way that with me works. Because it says a warrior model doesn't take part, I think that means they would still get to move if they're not tagged, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So just be careful of that.
I don't know.
And talk it out in advance.
Right. You'd want to be sure everybody's on the same page with that. But I believe that's how that would work. They're not taking part in the heroic action, which means...
It's basically as if they weren't in range.
Yeah, it doesn't cover them. They're not covered. They don't have the option to accept it or not. The way with me works is you choose to move or you choose not to. You choose to stay. So just be aware of that. I don't believe you can use this as a way of cheating those models out of future movement. I don't think that's how that
doesn't
works.
Seem right.
Right.
The rule is on page 69 of the main rulebook. The with me part, specifically for heroic move, the specific phrase is any model in range of the heroic move that chooses not to move as part of the heroic move will forgo their movement.
Right, so that's as part of the heroic move.
Means they have to be able to do it.
Right.
So I think if they're not able to do it, then it doesn't apply.
And they have to choose to not move as part of the heroic move. And this specifically says they don't get to participate in it. So I believe that's how that works. Just, something to think about.
That would be the kind and generous way to interpret it, and I think there's good basis for it as well.
I think that's consistent with the rules as written.
Even if it was more ambiguous than it is, I'm fairly certain I'd be like, they can't move ahead of the tempo, but they can move normal.
Yeah. The other thing, again, miasmic presence also shuts down 6-inch standfast. With me, not with me. Standfast, yes, the standfast, that's the one, yeah. So, again, support. More of an offensive support model in terms that he's sort of supporting your troops by shutting down what your enemy wants to do. But valuable, I think, all the same.
Maybe if we revisit these lists, we should make a distinction in support between your augmenters who make your guys better and your hexers who make your opponents worse. Maybe that.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of models here that will do both.
Yeah. In any event.
Evil has a lot that do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we look at some of the other honorable mentions, I chose at 4 points. He only made it onto my list. I have the Bat Swarm from Moria.
Even though it's not a hero.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we don't necessarily need. Yeah, exactly. I feel like we don't necessarily need heroes necessarily. I mean, obviously the big reason why I chose it is because, first of all, he's got fly, so it's a 12-inch move model, so you got a lot of positioning ability for this guy. And it's a model that has 2 attacks with 4 wounds, so you're actually relatively resilient for being only fight 1. But in the case of this guy, he also drops your fight value by half, rounded down, when you're engaged in combat with him. So that's kind of his support ability. He's not like amazing at 35 points, but I mean he's pretty good. He's a useful hex, and in an army where you've got cave trolls and stuff like that, it's a great way of kind of neutralizing heroes to soften them up right before the big hammer comes down.
He is a really great model to run the heirloom around with in heirlooms of ages past, because he's got lots of wounds, so you have to shoot him a lot, and he can fly to protective cover and stuff. Really useful.
No. This is not a he. This is a they. This is a swarm.
They.
They are probably both genders.
The swarm
maybe more genders. I don't know how
really
bats
good
are
model, singular. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. And then the final kind of honorable mention that we had was the Shadow Lord with 6 points, and the first model to have been on all of our lists.
As it turns out, one of the few models to make it on all
yes,
three of our
actually.
lists.
There's a lot of support models, and this one happened to be appealing to everybody.
So
it was brought up recently. I did not realize this until someone brought it up on Facebook. Not all of the models in the Mordor list cast Black Dart at the same range.
it's true.
Did you guys know that?
Yeah, Shadow Lord's only on like a 4-up or something like that. Yeah.
No, so he's got a 6-inch range.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. Now, of course, if you heard our last post on Evil Spellcasters, you know that we're all pretty down on Black Dart as a general thing, unless you really, really need it. But, I mean, I didn't even know that until recently, that he and the Undying have a diminished range. For me, of course, the primary reason you do it isn't so you can Black Dart people. You do it because when you need to not be shot up by elf bows, you want the Shadow Lord, right? And I'm fairly certain that's why most people would bring him. In anything, he's fairly cheap considering he's a hero of valor, and so he could bring an allied contingent of whatever things you want from Mordor into almost any list. And oh, by the way, keep those Corsairs from being shot, or those Angmar guys from being shot. Though that's not a great alliance for you to choose. But still,
no,
right?
It's not.
I mean, the point is you could do it. The point is you could do it.
That's true.
You can ally him in with Goblin Town or other things too, though that's also not a great choice.
Evil has almost no options when it comes to Blinding Light.
Yeah.
He may be the only option.
I think he's the only Auric.
Yep. So if you need protection from shooting, you got a Serpent Horde that's low defense or anything like that. You need some other buffs to make him harder. Yeah, Hunter Orcs.
Or you just need to bring.
He will help you with all of those things. He will help you with all those things. A couple of caveats about him: he is only Courage 5. He's not particularly brave for a ringwraith. He does not have the option for an armored horse. So, regular horses or fell beasts for him.
Horses are fine.
Yep. No, they are. They are. Because, if you want to take an armored horse, you cannot do that with him, even though the picture in the book, horse clearly has armor.
Some kind of cloak thing. Maybe that's his
there
cloak.
you go.
Maybe that's his cloak.
But yeah. Okay, well.
So, good model.
Yeah. Good model, but not quite enough to make it into the top 10.
Didn't quite make the top 10.
He made my 7, but...
To get us started off then in the top 10.
He made my top 10. I made all of our top 10.
Exactly, but he wasn't enough to make the collective top 10. At number 10 on the list, and this is not exactly a surprise, but scoring 8 points, we have Gollum from the Goblin Town list. Now, Wraithbird, he's the... You alone picked him.
He is, yes. He is my number 3 model. He's fallen all the way down to top 10 because I guess, nobody appreciates ring bearers.
That is exactly right.
That is apparently correct.
He is by far the fiddliest of the ring bearers because he is the last person on the hierarchy.
And the sneaky fingers like to...
There are lots of people ahead of him. Even old Bilbo is ahead of Gollum. I'm not sure why that is.
He's the third person to have the ring.
I know. I don't. Like I said, I don't know why that is.
Well, because most of the people in the game who interact with him, they have the ring when Gollum interacts with them.
Yes, that's true.
That's
Gollum really
Young
doesn't
Bilbo,
have the
Bilbo,
ring
Frodo,
at all
Heck,
at
until
any time
moments
during the
before he
story.
dies.
Correct, right. Which would make him the last person to have it.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe that's the
he's
rationale.
last. That's how it works.
He is high for me because I do rate the ring that highly. Especially, again, if the ring is part of a force where you have people who have really high fight value. And Goblin Town counts. Now, it is only if you have the Great Goblin, the Goblin King. I don't know why you would take
Goblin Town
without the Goblin King. There's really no reason to do that. In a pure force, you can take a bajillion goblins with the Goblin King. In a regular force, you can take a bajillion goblins with the Goblin King anyway. The Goblin King similar to Aragorn with Frodo, similar to Bard with Bilbo, the Goblin King and Gollum, if the ring is active, will beat anything else in the fight. The ring is active. And you'll beat a regular ringwraith, I guess, too, in the fight, because you'll have higher fight than them, because the Goblin King is fight 6. But there are a couple of important caveats. One, the will of Sauron is active for Gollum, so you do have to roll to see if you lose control of him, and you lose control of him a third of the time. Not great. 2, as I found out in games where I've used Gollum in Goblin Town, Gollum does not have great courage. So if you are trying to charge a hero that causes terror, you may have trouble with that. Now, that's a problem for all of Goblin Town, unless you happen to, play a game where they allow you to take a battle company and you've got a shaman who got fury. In which case, you're fine.
That would be
that's a once in a blue moon sort of a thing. But, if you did more power to you, milk that for all it's worth. But that's a problem, that courage. And he's also not remarkably resilient. He doesn't have great defensive stats. He's only defense 4. He's got 1 attack now, or 2.
No,
He's got 2 attacks, but he
two.
lost a point of might. Yeah, and so his stats are kind of, if you have the ring on, you may not be able to move him where you want to. If he does not have the ring on, he is very vulnerable to shooting. So he's not nearly as resilient as Bilbo or Frodo are when they have the mithril coat on. And he's certainly not anywhere near as resilient as Isildur is. So deploy him with caution. The good news is that he's going to be in an army with 100 models. So just put 18 in the ways in front of him and whatever it is that's shooting at him. And he will the law of averages says he will survive.
Yeah. So, by the way, the Gollum profile that is in the Goblin Town army is very similar to the one that is in the Fellowship.
There's Smeagol?
Yeah, for Smeagol. There's a 5-point difference between them. Gollum is 5 points more expensive.
Yeah. He's got the ring, potentially.
Exactly. So, but he's...
And Heroic March, apparently.
Yeah,
apparently
he
has Heroic
March.
Yeah, there you go.
So there you go.
I don't know that you'd ever spend his might point on that. I think you usually want it to bail you out of trouble. But, yeah. Cave Dweller 2, an underrated rule. He's got a 33% chance of getting that 6 if you got to hurdle something.
And can shoot models from a normal distance in Clash Ilmut by Moonlight.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, with his bow that he doesn't
but,
have. Yeah.
I mean,
he can finger shoot you.
He has the potential to do it.
Yeah.
Except he can't.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah. Good.
So cool. With that.
Yeah. He's a ring bearer, so he made my list, and he was pretty high on the list, but with obvious caveats.
That brings us then to number 9 on this list, and that goes to Tom the Troll from the 3 Trolls. You all will recall that I mentioned in the Monsters post that I didn't include Tom because I really saw Tom more as a support, so I decided to kind of give him a higher ranking on this list, and thus I didn't really rank him on the other one. And so I put him at number 4 on my list. Tiberius, you have him as number 9 on your list, and your son plays with him quite often.
Oh, loves him. Absolutely loves Tom. Tom is fun to use.
Cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about Tom then?
Yeah. So you can find the in-depth review on my post on the 3 Trolls. And they are a lot of fun. Tom has great anti-spam rules, which a lot of these other heroes we're going to talk about, if you swarm them with people, they fall. And Tom has this great brutal power attack that he can use where he squashes them to jelly. He basically jumps up and down and does a strength 6 hit to everybody that's in base contact with him. And knocks them prone, by the way, which is great for the follow-up attack. Obviously not that useful if you're fighting just one person, because you're strength 6, so might as well just strike them normally. But if you are ganged up on, or more appropriately, you probably will never be ganged up on because you can do that. He's also got heroic defense, which is a nice thing if you do get attacked by multiple heroes who can strike and you're worried about, oh, they're going to call strike, I'm not going to be able to sneeze on just the one guy in order to reduce his fight value. Though if they whiff it, you can still do that. But you could pop the heroic defense and just say, for one turn during the game, I become Ultraman and really hard to wound. That's a Ready Player One reference in case you guys missed it. Anyway, so there's lots of things that Tom can do to support, but by far and away the coolest support thing he can do is if you are fighting one man-sized model and you do not feel like you can wound him, you stick him in a bag. And it paralyzes them, which means that you can let someone else do the killing for you, and you can just walk on and enjoy your life and do something else and go squash other people, right? And so there's incredible flexibility with Tom. He doesn't have auric benefits like these other guys, but he can deal with basically anything.
And then just to make sure it gets said, lest people come after us in the comment section, you kind of alluded to it, but we'll cover it in full. He can sneeze on people, which is very nice.
Yes.
It reduces their fight value, which again is really good. And it kind of rounds out, there are a decent number of evil characters that can do that, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So
we talked about this a little bit in the monster one. The timing of the sneeze is important too. You get to do that when the fight starts, right?
Yes.
When you decide when you're going to sneeze or not, which means it's after the start of the fight phase, which means it's after anybody's decided whether they're going to strike or not. So they have to decide if they're going to strike before you. They have to commit to the strike before you commit to the sneeze. So if they don't strike, don't bother with it if you got higher fight. If they do, then you've essentially negated the strike. I mean, they can do the roll and then everything gets halved, and they're going to be fight 5 at most, and you're going to be fight 6. So it's not going to do anything. I do want to say just a brief thing about the squash them into jelly. So the one time it is a single strength 6 hit.
Yes.
Which is the reason why generally if you're only fighting one model, you wouldn't want to do that instead of just striking normally at strength 6 with 3 strikes. The exception, I think, would be if you've got a mounted guy, especially a mounted guy who's called heroic defense, because at a minimum, you're probably unlikely to wound them anyway if you get the 3. Because you can't might into stuff. It depends on how good you are at rolling multiple 6s. Realistically, you're probably only doing 1 wound anyway. Probably less than that. The law of averages would say less. But you knock them off the horse and they're prone. That's valuable in and of itself, if nothing else. I guess the alternative is you could also throw 3 strength 6 hits at the horse or the mount. Because the mounts are not covered by heroic defense. So you could do that.
But if you put him in the bag, he counts as paralyzed.
Right.
Paralyzed says you're knocked prone.
Yeah, there you go.
So you lose the horse either way. So just stick him in the bag.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, you're right. That's what you probably do.
So just stick him in the bag.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a courteous move to your opponent because he could wriggle out of the bag at the end of the turn. So it's not like you're being rude to the person.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Or maybe I'm just playing Captain Obvious here. You could, I guess, always just hurl the guy on the horse, right? In which case it falls off the horse. It counts as being knocked prone.
You don't roll for putting them in the bag, do you? You just decide.
You just
put
them in the
Never
bag.
mind. That is totally what you should do. No chance involved.
Unless, of course, the direction that
There
you're
you
going to
go.
be hurled in will do something good.
So anyway, all that to say, that's why he was so high on my list. I really liked him.
He's a good model.
He's a
great model.
Sitting slightly higher than him at number 8 with 11 points, I believe.
With 10 points.
With 10 points. 10 points. That's right. With 10 points, we have the Barrow-wight of Angmar.
Yep. We talked at length about Barrow-wights and what they do in the evil spellcasters. That for me, the critical thing for them is the fact, like we talked about, the paralyzed spell is so devastating for the reasons we just talked about with Tom. You're immediately trapped. You can't fight. You automatically lose fights. The threat of it is it forces your opponent to do things differently. They have to be mindful of where the Barrow-wight is at every point in time as long as you have will, which means you can have really large area of denial bubbles that are really good. Couple that with the fact that they make your orcs cause terror. And you have a really good, not only are they, now you've made it harder for you to be charged, but you've given a major disincentive, especially for big heroes, to want to charge your orcs in the first place. And big heroes are usually the ones that are most likely to be able to get past the terror wall. So you've added another layer of, it's very similar to what the Tainted is doing in any Nazgul with Harbinger of Evil, where you've stacked Harbinger on top of a terror boost to make the terror boost more effective. The Barrow-wight, in addition to giving the terror boost, also gives another reason why nobody wants to charge your orcs, even if they can. An elf force with Círdan and Aura of Command can get past your terror-causing elves, or your terror-causing orcs. They may not want to get past your terror-causing orcs or commit to your terror-causing orcs, even if they can charge them if you got a Barrow-wight lurking around.
And they're cheap.
Yeah, they're very cheap.
They're very cheap.
Very cheap Heroes of Fortitude.
The other big advantage that the Barrow-wight offers, and this is specifically within the context of Paralyze, is the utility of it specifically within an Angmar army. The terror bonus is really nice, but also because a lot of Angmar models are so low fight value that if you're up against another force, there's a very good chance you're going to lose a fight just off the bat because you're going to tie or the other person's going to roll higher. And so you're going to lose a lot of fights that way. And you don't have a really high defense army. The Barrow-wight's one of the few that is really high defense. He sits at defense 7. But for the rest of your army, you're mostly working with D5 and D6. And so the advantage that the Barrow-wight gives is to say, if you come near me and you're a big, heavy-hitting hero, my little orc over here with a two-handed weapon, a two-handed axe, or a two-handed pick, which is what the models are marked up with, if you're fighting him one-on-one, you're probably going to beat him, but if you're paralyzed on the ground, there's a very good chance he's going to piercing strike up to strength 4, he's going to two-hand, and he's going to win, and he's going to double his dice to try to whack you. There have been very few games where I've enjoyed fighting Shagrat. I have loved fighting Shagrat with an Angmar army, because 1 or 2 Barrow-wights on a single turn, that boy goes down, and there's a lot of pain going on with him. Add on to that a couple of models that can attack against the courage stat as opposed to attacking against the defense stat. And any army that doesn't have a really good magic defense, of which there are many, they're going to find a lot of trouble dealing with Barrow-wight.
Now, the cautionary tales, of course, we covered this in our last post on evil spellcasters. Barrow-wights have no might, so you got to get that 4 up, so cast it like you mean it, right? If you're going to casually throw a 1 dice paralyze at something, fine. Don't expect it to work, right? Manage the expectations. If you need it to go off, Kylie Stevenson's very renowned for throwing 4 will points at a paralyze, because then you get the 6. Right? You've got a really good chance at it. And if you've got to take down a hero, make him spend his resources to stop the 6. Right? But the other thing, too, is that not only do Barrow-wights not have might points, they also don't have fate points. So beware of those heroes who have banishment, because if they channel it, you could be toast. There's nothing like seeing a 1-turn pop against a Barrow-wight where they go from being dangerous to Gandalf the White sailing in on Shadowfax, casting, taking out some of their will for them to try to stop the thing. But if he says, I'm channeling it, 2 out of 3, if that thing goes off, you are gone. So it's a rough day for Barrow-wights that way. They're resilient. They're not that resilient, but they are also cheap. So hopefully you've got enough of them across the board that you can mitigate that too.
Yeah. At number 7 on the list at 13 points, we have the Easterling War Priest. Obviously, we talked about this guy a little bit on the spell casting side of things, but he appeared on my list at number 3, so relatively high, and then at number 6 on Tiberius's list. Very quick recap, Tiberius. Any thoughts as to why you included this guy?
Almost exclusively for Blade Wrath. As was mentioned in our other post, having Fury is nice when you need it. Easterlings have other ways of managing the Courage debuff. But, dude, Easterlings don't kill things. So anybody who can make your good heroes, or even the occasional grunts, strength 6, that's useful. And again, kind of like I had it when I was building my list, I was looking at, okay, how important is this unit for the army that they're in? Turns out, I don't think there's a good Easterling army that doesn't bring a War Priest. He's needed. right? One of your warbands is going to be led by a war priest, and it's specifically for three tries to get Blade Wrath off.
It's also a really nice thing the war priest is a hero of fortitude, so you can accompany him with a decent number of warriors as well. Obviously, the Blade Wrath thing is very true. I mean, being able to make somebody strength 6 for all of their fights in a round. So obviously, you want to ideally use it on somebody who can heroic combat and get in 2 fights instead of just 1. Be able to make it strength 10 if you choose to channel it. And on a 2-up, you can probably afford to channel it. You're probably going to get it off even on a single will point. And then, of course, Fury. Fury is just a great spell to have in case you want it. So there's that, too. I think another thing that's kind of forgotten about is the actual equipment options for the War Priest. He's a nice support hero, one, because you can mount him. So if you need him to be anywhere or everywhere on the battlefield, you can. And it's an armored horse, so it's relatively survivable. His battle staff is the real reason why I really appreciate him as a support, because not only does it count as a spear, so he can literally support as a support character. You can have him spear supporting in the 2nd rank, adding in an extra attack to try to help somebody win. But in addition to that, it's a 2-handed axe. So if you really need to, he can literally add to the damage count as well. He's not particularly strong. He's like fight 3, strength 3. But, since it's an axe, you could piercing strike up to strength 4 if you really wanted to, and it's a 2-hander. So, killing heavy dwarves on 5s, it's pretty decent.
With 2 attacks on the charge and the knockdown?
Yeah, that's not bad at all. And then, being able to do that on the same turn where you Blade Wrath somebody, so that way you're killing more people elsewhere. The guy can really add to the damage total, which is exactly the kind of support you need from an Easterling army. So.
And on behalf of Fury casters everywhere, when you need the Fury, you need the Fury. Yeah. And he can give that to the Easterling.
Next, we have a tie at 5th place between Druzhag the Beast Caller and the Dark Marshal. Both of them at 16 points. So maybe we'll talk about Druzhag first, because we covered him a little bit in our Spellcaster post.
Yeah, we covered both of these, actually.
Oh, right,
because the Dark Marshal made Tiberius' Spellcaster list also.
That's right.
He got an honorable mention.
In both these cases, we don't need to go really deep, but, the ability of Druzhag to make little tiny wild wargs or warg marauders, or if you get the right team-ups in it, I guess you could probably even do it on a wild war chieftain or something like that. You make some pretty beastly monsters out of this. Yeah, so that's a very useful feature. Anything else we want to say about Druzhag? I don't feel like we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about him, but
so unlike other Fury casters, he also boosts the courage of those same kinds of things that he could boost with Fury. So even if he chooses not to boost Fury, his spell and just him naturally, any of those kind of creaturey things within 12 inches of him, they get his courage value. Which, if you have a drum in a Memorialist, which you always should, he's courage 5, right? So these normal creatures that don't have great courage now have good courage, if not fury, right? And that courage goes up even higher if he drops Enraged Beast on them. It's a nice combo where he doesn't have to cast Fury in order to make units better at passing courage tests or staying after you get broken. And all of that. So, and really, that's really nice. It's a really nice benefit.
Yeah. Kind of similarly, we've got the Dark Marshal. He's, of course, kind of a mainstay of Mordor armies because he provides the big, massive banner bubble.
For warrior models.
Yeah, for warriors. So it's not going to affect your heroes. So that's neither here nor there. But
well, sometimes it is. It depends on the army you have.
But yeah, so anything you guys want to talk about the Dark Marshal?
We covered it before. He gives the 6-inch banner bonus. He has Harbinger of Evil, which is a great support spell if you're running anything that's related to terror. He's got Instill Fear on a 4+, which is pretty good. He's a decent fighting model. He's got Fight 6, which is nice. It's always nice. He is the one model in a fight with the Ringwraith and Aragorn and whoever else that, he can't strike, but, if Aragorn's out of might because he spent it earlier for a heroic move and he's out, he can actually be in the same fight with the ring bearer and be able to deal with that. So, you do have to watch out with him for all the wraiths, right? All the wraiths that have to spend will to trigger special abilities and don't regenerate them. You do have to watch how often you spend your will for your special things, especially if you want to spend any will to cast spells. So for him, because the I don't know why you would take him if you didn't plan on using the 6-inch banner bonus. 6-inch banners are really, really good. So you should plan to budget a point of will for each turn you plan to be in combat, which means he's got a 14 will pool, which means you can only spend up to 13. If you're going to be in combat for 4 rounds, you got to have at least 4 will points set aside solely for that. Everything else, has to be with that in mind. You don't have a 14 will pool, you've got a 9 will pool if you're planning to do that. And that's assuming you can be done in 4 turns of combat. If you're expecting a longer knockdown brawl, you got to budget more than that. So
more so than, I'm going to say, any other ringwraith, the Marshal runs out of will very quickly.
Because he actually is you want the banner bonus all the time, because the banner bonus in combat is always helpful. And he's also got enough spells, and you can kit him out on an armored horse, and he's fight 6, so you want him in fights, right?
So you want him to do all 3. The question is how much of all 3.
Right.
Personally, I think that he's really good in combat and popping the things, so the spells are optional. Though, running the instill fear on this guy can be a useful way to scatter enemy troops so that you can run them over better.
Or ignore them. If you're fighting a horde army, like goblins, any sort of goblins who have really bad courage, and swarm armies tend to like to be clustered around you anyway because they're trying to press your advantage. So, you could take a big chunk of them, 10 or 12 of them, all of a sudden, boom, they're fleeing. Now they're frozen. They can't do anything. You can engage them if you want to, or you can just ignore them, go fight somewhere else. Better yet, if you can sort of position the fight so that they're blocking other goblins, you do this to the middle of a battle line, and then you sort of tuck around and go to one side. Well, now you've got these immovable goblins standing there who could be a hindrance for your opponent. So, again, a lot of tendencies to spend his will. So you need to have a plan going into the fight for how much of it you're going to spend on all the things, because if you just go, I'm going to fight every turn with fight 6, and I'm going to cast a spell every turn, and I'm going to do this banner bonus, well, it turns out if you do that, you have 4 turns of use out of the Dark Marshal, and then you're down to 2 will, and you can't do all those things anymore.
And at that point, you're pulling back and hoping you're not charged to death.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So there's that.
Good model, though. Again, a lot of these named ringwraiths, most of them are kind of they're good casters. I don't know that they're any better than generic ringwraiths. Most of them are not as casters. As supporting models, with the exception of the generic ringwraiths have heroic march, which is good. It's good on a support piece. A named wraith is a better supporting model almost every time,
right, for
the extra abilities that you're getting with them.
That brings us into the top 4. Number 4 on this list, talking about ringwraiths with 17 points, is the Betrayer from Mordor and the Serpent Horde. So he's obviously really good. A lot of the Serpent Horde's going to rely on those poison rules. They're really taking advantage of being able to reroll low rolls to wound, and the Betrayer helps with that. In your case, Wraithbert, you had him as number 1 on your list.
Is the Betrayer number 4?
It is now number 4 because of the other people being bumped up and him being bumped up. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. I see. Somebody else got a jump as well. Okay. Yeah, I had the Betrayer ranked as number 1. I did feel like that might be a tad high. I was comparing him to some of the other models, and I do the reason that I put him first is I do think that he offers you the other models that are coming sort of suffer from their abilities are either not sustainable or they're easy to avoid. We'll talk about why that's the case with the other models. The Betrayer, like any other named wraith who has to spend will, as we've been saying over and over and over again, is ultimately not sustainable. His special ability is Master of Poison special ability. You cannot do it infinitely unless you happen to bring Carter's to Firecaller, in which case you can replenish your will. You get an extra,
T6.
3, 4, 5, 6 will points potentially. At that point, it probably gets you all the way through if you just cast that. But for the 5 or 6 turns that you can count on having it, the ability to reroll all poison rolls on all models within 6 inches of the betrayer is as really good a buff as any evil model and maybe even any good model could give you. Because what's the best way to cheat the odds on a die? It's to have a free, complete, unmitigated, unlimited reroll on the die. The only qualification, you don't have to roll a 1, settle for a 1, or even 1s and 2s, which I think at one point wasn't there something about what was 1s and 2s. Well, now it's just whatever. If it fails, anything that's not a whatever you need, a 4, a 5, a 6, you get a free reroll. The vast majority of the time, this will be used on your poison bows in a Haradrim list, the Serpent Horde list, at which point you have 24-inch bows. They are strength 2 bows, so they're not, they're not going to break the bank, but your odds of getting a 6 go up, it turns out, if you get to reroll a number that's not a 6. Instead of a 1 and 6, you got a 2 and 7. It's close to a quarter. It's about 22% or so.
So it's 11 out of 36, which is about 30%.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's even better than.
Which is really good.
It's for a strength 2 bow to take out a defense 6 model. That's really good. And because Haradrim are really cheap, right? This is all models within 6 inches. So like we talked about before, because these are bow models, we talked about 14 models for your front line. Potentially you stack them 2 lines deep because a bowman can shoot past another bowman. And everybody in Harad is defense 4, whether you're a bowman or a spearman or whatever. You don't really care about that. So, just stack them up in front of the guy. You could reroll 28, 28 of these at strength, at 24-inch range. It's pretty good. Well, then when you get into combat, you pull out your spears, and you're using them, your spears, if you have the green bonus or if you take serpent. Yeah. I'm only thinking of Serpent Riders.
So if you take Serpent
the foot
Guard,
version, right? The Serpent Guard, right? Serpent Guard, they've got poison spears base, and now you've got poison spears behind your front rank of Morannons, or your front rank of Abrakan Guard, or your front rank of 2 attack Watchers of Karna, or whatever it is you've decided to do, who are also benefiting from that poison as well.
I am a huge fan of having the front rank. If you do the 2 rows of Haradrim warriors with bows, if you're doing 2 ranks of bows, the front rank weapon swap for axes, and the second rank give them spears. They're fairly cheap still, even with this. They're like 8 points a model, so 16 per file that you want to do. But because you get poisoned weapons, the bows have poison, the spears have poison, the axes have poison, so you're all re-rolling 1s. Your defense is already trash, so what happens if it goes down even lower, right? They go from winning you on 4s to winning you on 3s?
Right. Why not piercing strike?
Dead either way.
Yeah. Why not get to strength 4 and now be re-rolling, searching for a 5 or a 6?
Yes, exactly. And then you're 55%.
You're at very good odds of killing stuff. It ups your killing power significantly. Really so Again, because it's a bubble that's a damage dealing bubble, especially because it's attached to range weapons, re-rollable to wound rolls that have 24-inch range are much harder to avoid than some of these other bubble effects that only have a 3-inch or a 6-inch range. So I thought now some caveats, right? Same thing. You can't blow. You cannot. If you are building around this, this is what the betrayer is doing. He is not taking advantage of Bane of Kings. He is not casting a 4+ transfix. Right. This is what he's doing. He's standing in the back. Maybe you brought along some Black Numenorians in a Corsairs list, and you have a terror wall, defense 6 terror wall in front of your guys. But this is what he's there for. He's there to buff your killing power from range, so that you can kill things faster than they can get to you, and so that by the time they get to you, you are in a position to swarm them and kill them even faster.
There was no chance the Betrayer was going to make our spellcaster list. He cast almost everything worse. But
Correct.
that plays to his advantages here, because it means you're just not going to cast. Unless you really need it, unless you really need it, you're just not going to do it. So he just takes that entire bin of things and says, wad that up, forget it, not casting. I'll save my will to resist enemy magic because it's coming. I'm going to use it to pop this special roll. Maybe I use it to keep myself alive, but I'm not going to go looking for a fight. Right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. He can do those things if you need him. If you need a spot spellcaster, he can do it. If you need a killing piece, he can do it. But this is what he's for, and so, unless you're taking him in a list with all the Nazgul for thematic reasons, if you're building an army list around his ability, this ability built around is one of the most devastating abilities in the game. And I felt like that was enough to push it above the other support models for me.
So if you had the ability to rewrite a portion of the source book and remove the Bane of Kings special rule from the Betrayer and replace it with one more will point, would you do it? Because it would definitely put him in more of a niche. He would do. I
don't think so. The reason is that the Bane of Kings is really nice in those weird circumstances if you get charged.
Right.
Because, yes, you've only got the one attack, so it's kind of like, But again, your odds to wound go up quite a bit if you get to reroll all failed to wound rolls. Yeah. And there are some players who play him more aggressively. On a Fell Beast, a Fell Beast with 3 attacks on the charge, with monstrous charge that gets to roll 6 dice to wound if they knock a model prone at strength 6 is scary enough. It's even more scary if you get to reroll all failed to wound rolls. So I think for those players, it adds a nice flavor. Like, he is not on paper. He is not a better combat piece than Khamûl. He's not a better combat piece than the Knight of Umbar. He's certainly not a better combat piece than the Witch King. But if you win the fight, which is always the thing for him, he can't strike. He's got no fight value shenanigans and all that stuff. But if he wins the fight, especially if you've mounted him, odds are pretty good that he is going to at least wound, if not kill, whatever it is that he's fighting. So I would keep it. I don't think it. I think it's 1 will point, I wouldn't. 2 will points, you sort of start thinking about it.
Okay. Sounds good. That brings us into number 3 on the list. In third place, edging out the Betrayer just barely by 2 points, we have the Goblin Scribe of Goblin Town. So, Tiberius, you have him as number 1.
This is my number 1.
This is user bias.
Yes. I hate
heavily
this
influenced
piece.
by
this
user
is
bias.
a horrible piece, and let me tell you why. Because the Goblin Scribe will find the darkest corner of the map and have a small squad of pallet bearers to scoot him around because he's a heavy object, right? And what he'll do is every turn he will write a memo and say, I need more guys, and take a courage test. And if he passes it, he brings more guys on the board wherever you want them. Any board edge, they just start flocking in. Oh, and by the way, if he passes the courage test by extra, each extra point means another guy walks on. So if he gets the all-glorious 12 on the 2 dice for his courage test, he's bringing on at least 3 models. Oh, except he's got normal courage. So he's bringing on, he's what, courage 2? So he brings on at least
3, I think.
5 models.
Yeah, I believe he can max out at 8.
It's a courage 3 then, I guess.
Number.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just bonkers. And worst thing too. If you bring an allied contingent that can get a war horn, right? He's a friendly model, right? So I mean, it's horrible. Having 2 or 3 models walk on the board from one side of it, right? I mean, but behind your ranks, if you're a shooting army, you're sitting in the back and they walk in behind you, fine, whatever, it's 3 models. When you have 6 or 7 walk on, you're like, I need to do something about that. Yes, these are extra models that do not add to your break point. They can contribute to you breaking, of course, right? I mean, but still, you're throwing in these models and it forces your opponent to play differently. And oh, by the way, he is dirt cheap. He is dirt cheap. For like 50 points. If you walk on too many models this way, you will pay for him really easily. And personally, so my son likes to use him in a convenient alliance so he doesn't spam out lots of goblins. this makes it so that even though you start with like a high 20s, low 30s, you get up above 40 or 50 models by the time the game is over.
Yeah, yeah. So he's base courage 3. So if you have a Warhorn that comes in, there are some armies that could do. I mean, he's convenient with what? Is he convenient with Mordor and all those Lord of the Rings armies?
Those up now.
I don't know about that now that I think
not
about
sure
it. I think they generally kept the Hobbit armies distinct from the Lord of the Ring armies.
He's got all the Azog stuff, the little
Yeah.
Goldor stuff, and the Mirkwood stuff, and Smaug, and Moria, who doesn't get things. So in order to get the Warhorn, you'd have to do an impossible.
Yeah, I was going to
Which I don't
say, because
think you
I
wanna
played
do.
around with that before.
Take that back.
He is base courage 3 though, so anytime you pass the courage test, which is 7 or above will pass, you get D3 plus whatever your excess is. So at courage 8 you're getting +1, courage 9, if you roll a 9 +2, 10 +3, 4, and 5 if you roll the 12. So that's at least 5 plus the 1 that you'll get at least, so between 6 and 8 if you roll the 12, which is a lot. It's a lot of models, and sort of realistically speaking, if you're careful about setting him up within the ways and everything, you can set him up in such a way that he's very difficult to deal with. So he's got 4, 5, 6 unrestricted turns. Centaur has found something for us on the Warhorn courage boosting.
So, of course, this would be the model that would break the curve.
Of course.
The Signal Tower for Azog's Legion, which is a convenient alliance with Goblin Town, comes with a number of different parts, one of which is the Horn of Gorgoroth. And the first words about the Horn of Gorgoroth is it counts as a war horn.
It does other things too. What
yes,
else
it does.
it do?
Well, also, additionally, all enemy models on the battlefield suffer -1 to their courage value. Note this is not cumulative with other rules that confer similar penalties. So,
yeah.
So
that
there's,
would do it.
There's your war
it.
horn.
And if you're going to
There you
spend
go.
all that money on the Warhorn, you'd better bring some cheap troops. So why not Goblin Town?
Yeah. Goblin Town sort of suffers more than some as a horde army if you ally them, but if you're just bringing them as a contingent, to fluff your list,
They've
why
done
not?
just
Yeah.
fine with the 3 trolls, in my humble personal opinion.
The advantage for the Scribe, I played against the Scribe, and I've used the Scribe some as well. The advantage of the Scribe is, in addition to giving you more bodies, which is always nice, especially if you're fighting near if you're fighting anywhere near a boardage against Goblin Town, you do not want to be doing that. You want to move as much as you can towards the center of the board because you want to get away from these edges, because that increases the amount of time that these 5-inch move goblins are there. The situations where that is problematic are if you run siege weapons. The Goblin Scribe is the worst possible draw you can have, I think, because your siege engines have to deploy within 6 inches of the board edge in every scenario, I believe. And so they are, unless you are not using the siege weapon and you're sort of pushing it into the middle of the board, which means you're not firing it, the goblins are going to be able to get to it very, very fast. And if they're bringing on even 3 or 4 goblins, and especially if they get the 8 or 9, the 8 or the Doomsday 9 drop, they're going to be able to tag your guys and tag your siege engine and have enough guys that with the reinforcements that are coming, they're going to be able to probably, they can tag you with enough guys unless you have dedicated troops protecting the siege engine, they're going to at some point be able to overwhelm the siege crew, tag them, leave a model in position touching it, so that, or multiple models so that you cannot tag them all and prevent them from being in base contact with the siege engine and doing nothing else for a full turn, which is what they do to disable it. So it really wrecks that. And of course, in any sort of objective capture scenario, these guys are just brutal because they can come on behind, you think you're safe, capture and control, you tag the one that's back in your thing. Well, no, all of a sudden there's 12 goblins that are spawned on your board edge that are slowly, methodically making their way towards your objectives that you thought were safe, while you're trying to deal with 100 goblins that are in front of you, trying to press on the other 3 objectives that you're trying to capture. So, underrated. It gives Goblin Town mobility, which
Yeah.
Goblin Town should not have. They're all 5-inch move goblins that have no shooting. It doesn't seem like they ought to be able to threaten multiple parts of the board anywhere that they're not, and yet the Goblin Scribe allows them to do that.
Yeah. I will take this slight moment to mention that because of the fact that you can basically hide away the Goblin Scribe and pulling guys anywhere on the board, this just further underscores why the Legendary Legion for Shire is so great, because you can pop up a whole bunch of your people right next to wherever they try to hide the Goblin Scribe and take him out relatively early.
And turn 3.
Exactly.
Turn 3.
So that is a useful thing. But all of that is nothing for what we're talking about, which is supports for Forces of Evil. So we will move on to discussing number 2 on our list, coming in at 20 points. And this is Gothmog from Mordor, or the Special Legendary Legion.
Yeah. I had him ranked as high as 1, and he ended up sort of dropping. So I have him at 5. I think Tiberius has him higher.
I have him at 2.
I have him at 6.
In the Legendary Legion, the thing about Gothmog that made me question where to put him, and I ultimately erred in putting him about in the middle, is that when his abilities are on, they are very, 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 very good.
Yeah.
But his abilities, in many respects, are very dependent on the army that you're fighting. If you are not fighting men, his effectiveness decreases dramatically, even if you're in the Legendary Legion. And of course, the advantage of the Legendary Legion is now all your orcs are getting +1 to wound against men if they're within 12 inches of Gothmog, which is an enormous range. And that's all turns for the entirety of the game. It's a fabulous ability if you're fighting men. If you are not fighting men, it is doing nothing for you. So that's issue number 1. If you're fighting good versus evil, you have an awful lot of men, but there are an awful lot of very attractive elf and dwarf armies as well. So I'm not sure how often you see this. Even if you have a sort of mixed force like a Last Alliance force, this would be the weird circumstance where a Last Alliance army guy might say, you know, I'm going to put my Defense 6 elves in front and have my Númenórean spear support them at Strength 4. I typically wouldn't do that because the elves are higher fight, even though they're higher defense. They're more expensive. I like to keep them in reserve. In this case, I certainly would, because no +1 to wound against Defense 5 guys, which is a recipe for disaster, especially if you've got Morannons with axes who are piercing striking, being like, hey, let's be Strength 5, effective Strength 7, wounding your Númenóreans on 3s. Why would we not do that? The battlefield-wide or 12-inch range reroll all failed to wound rolls, which is his special skill. The other one, so at the time of the Orcus
Time of the Orcus
is a good skill, but it's a one-shot. It only counts for one turn. So again, sustainability-wise, that's the concern. It's an excellent ability when it fires. The problem, of course, is if you're not fighting men, that's all Gothmogs bring to the table, apart from Master of Battle, which is a very, very, very good support spell. As long as your opponent, again, dependent on your opponent, as long as your opponent has might, which, you know, not every army does, believe it or not, and is calling heroic actions within 6 inches of Gothmog, which they learn very quickly not to do, and assuming you're good at winning 50-50 roll-off. So, again, when all this stuff fires, very, 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 very good. Doesn't fire all the time, and when it doesn't fire, he's a very expensive, pretty good combat model. And that's really it.
He has... So I ranked him number 2 with the thought that he was in the Legendary Legion.
Mm-hmm.
The normal one is, meh, whatever. Right? I mean, 3-inch boost to give hatred to men is whatever. You know, I mean, like any 3-inch buff, it's so limited as far as how much range you have. It does get better if you are on a warg, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you could cover a full, 7 or 8 man battle line in front of you. If you're standing there in the, kind of in the supporting 4th rank with a blank 3rd rank so they can back up.
But it's not Holfoot Bracegirdle and a 6-inch buff for Hobbits.
It's not Holfoot Bracegirdle with a 6-inch buff for Hobbits. And frankly, I mean, it's like, I included this because if you're going to run, and that's not tongue in cheek for me. I think Holfoot is important.
He doesn't have a 6-foot bubble though, does he?
It is important.
Yeah. All the people are like, "Whoa, Holfoot has a 6-inch bubble." No, that's not true. That's not true. It's a 3-inch bubble.
It's a 3-inch bubble with a 7-inch radius or whatever.
Yeah.
But an important one, a necessary one for your team. I think if you're going to run Mordor orcs, and especially if you run them in the Legendary Legion, I mean, of course, you have to bring Gothmog, but he is essential to making that thing work, right? I mean, and it's his orc supports that make it work. It's not his offensive profile. Yes, his profile is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. It'll do work. The one thing that I think he struggles with is he is fight 5. A fight 6 hero, if you charge into him, that fight 6 hero is not calling strike.
Right.
You have to call it first. And if you call it first and then he calls it, Master of Battling it doesn't give you your might point back.
Right.
If he was fight 6, and then your opponent would be like, well, do I just take the roll off? Right? You know, if I'm fight 6, if I'm Immerhill or something, do I just rely on that roll off, or do I call a strike? In which case he's gonna copy me. I guess I do. Right? You know, I mean, and so it would be better. But against most people, it's like, well, I'm fight 6, he's fight 5, whatever, right? You know, be that way.
Yeah. You don't want to throw him at a fight 6 hero. In fact, if possible, you want to screen him from any fight 6 heroes that are running around. Use your Morannon orcs to do that. They're pretty good at that. You know, they can shield at defense 6. They've got a decent chance at striking him off. And of course, if you got the 6+ save from Kardish floating around, you're in a good spot with that too. But yeah, you don't want to be throwing him. I mean, he can do it if you need him to. He is he's got heroic strike. He is only strength 4, which is unusual for a Morannon, but he's only got half his body, so I guess that is functional. So I guess that's probably part of it. But you want your unless you've got the the Mouth of Sauron around, who can transfix, to support him, or some other hero that can transfix, probably want to keep him, beat up on fight 5 captains are your sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's where you want to be, any sort of fight 5 captain, because of course they can't strike. Even the ones who could, you'd get your master battle out there if you need to. But any and fight 4 captains, you eat them up.
And that brings us to number 1 on the support side. May not come as a surprise. This one was ranked in at least the top 5 for everybody. At 25 points, we have the Shades of Angmar. So these guys were my number 1, and they were your number 2.
That's correct. Yes, I had a number 2.
Just behind the Betrayer, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for the reasons I've talked about. Yes.
Exactly. And Tiberius, you have Shades way down at number 5.
Yep.
It's below the Dark Marshal.
Absolutely.
It's below Gothmog.
Yep. This is mostly due to the new rules that came out in February of 2020. I'm a huge fan of Wild Wargs. I'm an even larger fan of Wild Warg Chieftains. And they will get penalized by the Shade now.
Yeah, so will Burley Cave Trolls.
Cave Trolls.
The Shade is not as good as it used to be. That's just a fact of life.
And from previous editions, the debuff that they have, the Chill Aura, used to be free. It used to just be a static roll. And then with the new one, they can do it 8 times, which should do work for you. But I mean, if you have an enemy caster, like Gandalf the White, worst case scenario, right? He throws a banishment at you, right? Maybe channeling it. Any dice you throw to resist, because you're not resistant to magic, any dice you throw is turns you are not going to be casting Chill Aura. And that's bad. That's really bad. And other heroes who have commands move you away from the effectiveness, that's bad. Right? They're also a 100-point investment with no might points, which means that, like many Angmar armies, if you already have Barrow-wights in your army, you're either going to run really low on might, if you include a Shade, and maybe you're okay with that, maybe you're okay going second, but you could run your army with very little, if any, might points, if you invest too much in a Shade.
Yeah.
So I think it's great, top 5 from me, but not as high as some of the other heroes that we talked about.
with all of that said, shades are not as good as they used to be. It is important, I think, not to undersell just how devastating the Shades chill aura can be. Even if you have a lot of heroes, it's very dangerous. It's less dangerous now that you don't have, cave trolls can't, cave trolls get a nerf on that and all that other stuff. But your normal orcs are suddenly really survivable because they have a 1/3 chance of tying your fight value, the best possible fight value that you can get. Because if you roll a 6, it becomes a 5. If they roll a 5, it stays a 5. Now you've got tied fight, so now you're down to, advantages. How much might you're going to spend might to bump it up. What's your fight value? Your relative fight value. It's just another thing. We talked about resource management being so important for a lot of these support models and the models that can play with the way that you do resource management. If you've got any sort of heroes in your army, Birder is the obvious one. Although I guess Birder is an Angmar model, yes, so he's fine.
Yeah.
Gulavar is fine.
The Witch King.
The Witch King is obviously fine because you can have that. All the named wraiths are going to be fine as well.
It's just about
captains, even orc captains, fight 4 orc captains are now suddenly, they're fight 4, they don't look like much, but they get a 6 and you get a 5 as a hero. It doesn't matter if you're Gil-galad. Now you got to decide, I got to decide if I'm going to spend might to kill this. Now Gil-galad probably does because he's got blood and glory, but there's a lot of heroes who that's a sunk cost if you're burning might points now to make your 6s back into 6s. So, a lot of, is Golfimble as well?
Golfimble is too, yes, he has the word. Which, complete
Golfimble.
Aside, if you haven't bought the Scouring of the Shire book and you haven't looked at Golfimble, he's only 40 to 50 points if you choose to mount him on a warg. It's 40 points otherwise. And the boy has, he's got 2 might points with 2 attacks at strength 4 and fight 3, so he's a pretty decent fighting hero, and he's got a hand and a half mace, so you could 2-hand with this guy.
That's the other thing too, right? Is all of a sudden if you're anywhere close with tied fight value, you're fighting another fight 3 army. All these orcs are suddenly like, hey, well, let's just 2-hand with all of our 2-handed weapons that we brought because we're basically it's going to be 50-50. Why not? Everybody's getting -1s. Unless the other side is 2-handing, they're getting -2s, which
most people
are
don't.
just brutal. No, you typically don't. You just don't want to do anything near it. So this is a really devastating ability, but it is only 6-inch range, so it is easier to avoid. Yeah. And if you've got any sort of caster, like you said, who can cast Banishment, who can, try to transfix the Shade, try to compel the Shade. The Shade does not have resistance to magic. The Shade is digging into its will pool anytime that you have to do anything to defend yourself from magic. So I do think the reason the Shade was second for me was because as devastating as the ability is, if you fight anywhere the Shade is not, it is not affecting you. And if you can force the Shade to spend will for anything other than the chill aura, it is affecting you less. And those are things you do not always have control over when you bring the Shade.
One final caveat about the Shade, I can't remember if we brought this up anywhere else. If you are facing Deadmarsh Spectres or Wood Elf Sentinels, bad day. Because your Courage 1, right? They will target you and make you move a full move.
And that's assuming there's no Harbinger anywhere.
That is assuming that there's no Harbinger or Harbinger-like benefits, in the case of the Wood Elf Sentinels, in order to make you go down to Courage 0. And it's horrible. It's just horrible, right? So as bad as the banishment people are, there are actually worse people. Yeah.
So make sure there are things you can do to mitigate that risk, right? The obvious one is make sure that you take 2 pleb orcs and barricade the Shade so the Shade cannot physically move. Because if that's the case, then they got to move one of the orcs to move your Shade, and it takes more time, all that stuff. Now, if you're facing 15 Spectres, there's not really anything you can do.
Not much you can do.
to deal with that. But most people don't run 15 Spectres anymore. That'll be another niche list. So, the low courage is an issue, especially, of course, if you break. And, again, the new rules have not have made it even easier.
They've not been kind to the shade.
For the shade to break, flee if you're breaking. So, yeah, just be aware of that. But a very good model, a very good supporting model.
Still worth
especially,
playing.
again, if in a large points game, the thing about the shade, right? All the things that we've talked about are if you can avoid the shade, if you can pull will points off the shade. Those things are very easy to do when the shade is the big bad centerpiece moving down the board in a low points game. Much harder to do if Gullivar is breathing down your neck, if the Witch King is tying up your wizard, if Birder is chomping through your troops.
And then there's a shade.
And there's a shade somewhere else. And, oh, by the way, probably a Barrow-wight, too.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So he, more so than any of these other support pieces, I think, really benefits if you can get to oversaturation, target oversaturation for your opponent, where they have to pick their poison. If they settle for the shade's poison, they have to fight where the shade is. You get an objective-based scenario where you can sort of park the shade somewhere. Yeah. He's really hard. Terror orcs are hard. Terror orcs with Harbinger are harder. Terror orcs with Harbinger when you're fighting -1 to your dual rolls, almost impossible to move them. So there you go. Take Angmar by itself. Don't bother allying it. It's plenty good as it is.
Yeah. They're good.
Yeah, and if you get access to the full panoply in Angmar's arsenal, it's one of the scariest factions. Even 2 or 3 of those, any 2 or 3 of a Barrow-wight, a Shade, the Witch King, Birdur, Gullivar, is very difficult for a lot of armies to deal with.
So we're going to take another quick break, and then after that we're going to return for our final segment as we talk about list building. Well, welcome back. We're moving into the section where we talk about list building because we know you guys really love that and we really enjoy it. And so we've each picked one army from the forces of good and one from the forces of evil to kind of talk through a pocket full of power. So roughly 450 points or less, ways that you can build it out and make your army just a useful contingent or the core of a pure force. So beginning us off first here on the forces of good, we have Wraithbert. Wraithbert, what kind of list have you built for us today?
So I have built a list around Frodo Baggins of the Shire, who's in the Fellowship list, not the Shire list. The Ringbearer version of Frodo. There are, of course, a lot of ways that you go with Frodo. The Fellowship, you can get your choice of Aragorn or Gandalf, plus Frodo, plus Sam, plus Boromir and Merry and Pippin, I think, would all fit under the threshold of the 450. And that would be, a welcome addition to a lot of armies. You'd have, a bajillion might and tons of fate, not on Boromir, but on everybody else. And you can do some nifty stuff with that. I've chosen to go in a slightly different direction because that's not really all that exciting, though I guess I just did give that list.
Bonus list.
So I've decided to go with Frodo from the Shire, with Sting in the Mithril Coat, along with Sam and Smeagol, which you can take as long as your warband only includes Sam or Smeagol. If you wanted to swap out Smeagol for Build a Pony, you could do that as well. Save yourself some points, give yourself a little bit of an intrigue. But for sort of thematic reasons, I've decided to go with Sam, Frodo, and Smeagol. I have created an allied contingent that you could ally into other lists. The obvious choice for thematic reasons would be Faramir, so that's where I've gone. Faramir with the bow, just the bow, and Madril, his captain, who's with him. This gives you a surprising amount of might, as it turns out, because you've got Frodo with the 2, Sam's got 2, Smeagol has the 1, so that's 5 already, plus 6 from the 2 named Gondor here. So that's 11 might, which is a pretty good amount of might for a contingent. Madril gives you some other things. He gives you the access to Heroic March, which is really important to have in an army. Faramir, of course, gives you Strike and Defense and Resolve, which is a nice cadre of skills to have as well. You got Defense and I think Resolve on Frodo as well, and of course Sam's got the synergy with Frodo. Is that right? Okay, yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, and then Sam's got the nice synergy with Frodo where he can call heroic combats if he's in the same fight that Frodo is in. So nice synergies there, and then Smeagol's around just sort of being annoying and strangling people. I have decided to take some troops as well because this would be more thematic, going for that sort of the March to Osgiliath sort of a theme. So I've included, obviously because it's a ranger force, 5 rangers who have bows and spears. Unfortunately, this is the most that you can take in a standard force. If you want more, you want to take all these guys in the Legendary Legion, the Faramir's Ranger Legendary Legion, which at low points levels is better than this allied contingent in every way, except that you can't ally other things to it if you wanted to. So 5 rangers with bows and spears, so they can be sort of multi-purpose. You could use some fight 4 if you need it. The bows are good on a 3+ shoot. They're only strength 2 bows, but it's 3+ shoot, 24 inches. The spears allow them to be dangerous when you get into combat. I've also taken 5 warriors of Minas Tirith that have shields and 5 warriors of Minas Tirith that have shields and spears, so you can get your shield wall formation in. And to kick it off at the end, 2 Knights of Minas Tirith, which I don't believe you can take in the Legendary Legion.
No.
So this gives you at least a little bit of a mounted contingent. These are really cheap warriors. They hit pretty hard. They're not, they fight 3, so you want to make sure they're supported. You don't want to rush them into shield wall that's got superior fight. But if you have a ranger in the same fight as them to get you past the fight value, they will hit really hard and they will kill a lot of things when they win, because the strength 3 with the +1 to wound on the lance at double dice is pretty good. So that comes out to 446 points. And a decent number of models is 17 warriors plus the 5 heroes gets you to 22. And again, awful lot of might that you can use. And Faramir is a very good mid-tier hero. This is not him kitted out in the full kit by any stretch. But even so, 3 might with fight 5 with heroic strike or heroic defense. He's a nice sort of centerpiece anchor here to have, especially if you can throw him into combats with Frodo and the Ring, where he's now suddenly able to take on guys who are significantly better in terms of stats and cost a lot more points than he is. So there you go.
Cool. For the list that I'm providing, I'm building mine around Malbet the Seer, as he was my number 1 choice. Arnor is a very restricted, very limited army. But for 400 points, I have the following list. It only has 2 warbands. The first is led by Arvedui, the last king of Arnor, and the second is led by Malbet the Seer. Arvedui brings with him 12 warriors of Arnor and 6 rangers of Arnor, and Malbeth brings a similar contingent of 8 warriors and 4 rangers. And this comes out to only 400 points. And it includes 32 models. And I primarily see this as kind of an armored and heavy spear contingent that you could easily throw into an army. Everybody except for the heroes has a spear in this build. The 10 Rangers of Arnor all have bows as well, so you have a pretty nice, quasi-gun line that you could trade out a little bit if you wanted to. But I primarily see this as being, a useful thing for you to team in if you're okay with losing the army bonus for both of the groups that you're working with. They've got some pretty decent, convenient allies. The most notable one that I really like is the Kingdom of Khazad-dûm, where you could take, a couple of dwarf kings because they're relatively inexpensive, but you still get a really good bang for your buck. You could take a bunch of Khazad guards alongside them. Heck, you could take everybody in the entire dwarf force with 2-handed weapons, and you'll be fine because you have a spearman backing you up, as you've got 30 spears being added to your contingent through the Arnor list. And for everybody that's within 6 inches of Malbeth, they're getting a 5-up save. So you've got your heavy D7 plus dwarves, backed up by a bunch of D6 or D4 spearmen with a 5-up save. Very resilient, tough as nails, you'll crack a lot of stuff. And the whole army that you're adding in is Fight 4+.
One minor note, Arvedui is actually a hero of valor.
Oh,
so you probably take a banner.
Exactly, yeah.
You drop 3 people and take a banner.
Take a banner on yourself.
Because that's good.
You're good to go. Yeah. So,
yeah.
but that's the kind of list that I would do. Again, you are kind of limited as regards your options for Arnor, but hey, large Bracilli Porcupine Wall, they do that pretty well.
They do.
If you're allying him with Khazad-dûm, just take a King's Champion.
There you go. Yeah, that would work.
Well, you will need a hero of valor, so take a Dwarf King too.
Yeah. There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My list tonight comes to you from the Plains of Rohan with tonight's winner in the Forces of Good category, Gamling with the Royal Standard. Gamling shows up in almost, I've been preparing for a post on Rohan that's coming out in a few weeks. Gamling shows up in almost every single Legendary Legion. And there's good reason why most people bring him. But most people say, well, you bring Gamling and you bring Theoden, and then you start negotiating between the other killing heroes, whether you bring Durnhelm or Éomer or whatever. But there's a really good hero that ages ago when I was first looking into getting started in Rohan, I was like, no, there is one hero that you bring Gamling with. And that is Eorl the Young. Now, a lot of people don't do this because, one, it breaks theme. But two, because Eorl has the special rule that says that if you bring Eorl the Young and any other named any other named hero models from the Rohan army list, then you automatically lose your army bonus. Now, the Rohan army bonus is very good, but it is conditionally very good. Going +1 strength is useful when you are striking and trying to deal wounds to a model that is the opposite of your strength. So if you're an odd strength model, you don't want to be facing even strength models. Well, even defense models. You want to be facing odd defense models, right? But that also means that if you lose your army bonus, it means that sometimes it wasn't doing anything for you. So it's okay to lose it. So to bring our army together for 115 points, I have Gamling with both the standard and the horse, because there's no reason why you wouldn't bring the horse. And Eorl the Young, who's an additional 115 points. And supporting them, we have 6 Sons of Eorl and 5 Rohan Royal Guards on horses with throwing spears. And this brings you to a nice hefty 13 cavalry models at 440 points. The cool thing about this list is that you can also bring Theoden. If you were to expand this out, you could bring Theoden, who will make these Rohan Royal Guards even better. The Rohan Riders, not counting against your Golem, is an additional rules, not part of your army bonus. So you can bring as many of those guys as you want. Those guys can all have axes, so if you need that +1 strength, you can get it. The Sons of Eorl can also piercing strike to get that +1 if you want it. You could pay 5 points to this list to give the Rohan Royal Guards axes as well if you wanted to get that potentially +1 strength, which basically means you don't need the army bonus. And so giving it up is fine. You can also ally with Minas Tirith if you were to build this list out. Kings of Men, Knights, Bristly Shield Wall, whatever you wanted. So I like this list a lot. You get a whole lot of strength from it, some really powerful troops. And again, if you throw Theoden in here as well as like an older Thangel version, if you would, then you can up the fight value of the Rohan Royal Guards, getting that fight 5 on the charge, which everybody knows and loves. So
I have 2 comments/questions about the list that I think I won't be the only one who has them. The first thing is that, yes, there are ways that Rohan can replicate the +1 strength, piercing strike. Rohan can take a bajillion axes and it doesn't break them at all. But you can also take those same things in a regular Rohan list if they do have the army bonus, in which case you go up 2 strength, right?
correct, yes.
So I guess I don't know that that's a question. That's the first thought that I have. The larger thought is, if this is an army that's built around the banner, and I understand how the synergy with Eorl the Young would theoretically work. Yeah, his legendary, he gets a might point for free.
Potentially, yep.
Doesn't work all the time. It seems like with only 2 heroes, one of which is Gamling, it would be relatively easy to proc this bonus, but it seems like the typical way for most Rohan lists that are built around Gamling is they have lots of heroes, and this army does not have that.
So Gamling, Eorl, and the 6 Sons of Eorl are 350 points. You could choose to not run the 5 Royal Guards if you wanted to. That conveniently gives you enough room for Theoden, fully maxed out, would fill in that 100. You'd also have room for Durnhelm or Elfhelm. Daerwine wouldn't make much sense because you don't have Theoden in the list. There are heroes you could throw in. Basically, I think you could even run Theodred pretty much maxed out too. The only person you really couldn't run in this list would be Éomer, though Éomer and Eorl are fairly close to an even swap between the two of them. Eorl comes out a little bit cheaper. He's got 1 less will point, 1 less fate point. The potential to gain might back is one thing, that maybe he has against Éomer. But I mean, you could run this as a hero-heavy list if you wanted to. The banner will be welcome for any of your warriors as well. Those Sons of Eorl with the +1 attack, they'll be near hero level anyway. If you're looking at proccing that might, though, I mean, Eorl, if he can get that free might point back after he's expended and then not do it, he can basically spend 2 might points for free each turn, which you will not see on any other Rohan hero. So I think it's useful. I think if you were to blow out the list, you'd want to have more heroes in the list, and you could certainly do that. For mine, I don't see a 9 model Cav list at 450 doing particularly well. So I went out with numbers instead.
Yep, that's fair. As a small contingent, certainly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good.
Sweet. As we move into the Forces of Evil, I'll lead off with my Easterling list that I'm building. I'm going to build mine around the War Priest. In this case, it is a 449-point contingent of 27 models. It sports Omdur on a horse, an armored horse, with 6 Black Dragon Easterlings with swords and shields, 6 Easterling warriors with pikes, and then in the next detachment, you've got a War Priest with 6 Black Dragons with swords and shields, 4 Easterling warriors with pikes, and a banner. And then an additional Easterling warrior with a banner. This is a kind of tough as nails, heavy-hitting 2-attack balls, which is really nice. You've got Omdur providing a banner bubble on the one side. You've got another banner to anchor the other side of your battle line. You've got 10 pikemen for giving various levels of support, so you can pick and choose which battles you want to win versus the ones that your opponent may think that they can win. You've got heavy amounts of shielding, of course, that you can do all the way around. You've got Omdur with 3 to 4 attacks based on whether or not he's on the charge and who he's against. And all around this, on top of all of that, you've got a choice of which of these guys do we want to make Strength 6 or hack Strength 10, if you really feel like it. This gives you a lot of avenues for potential damage. Of course, everybody will note that you got to be a little careful as regards how to do damage with an Easterling army, but this one at least helps to allay that. You've got 11 people providing spear support. You've got excellent and adequate banner coverage to ensure that you win fights that you should be winning. You've got heavy-hitting heroes who could take on the Balrogs of the world for at least a turn, being able to become Strength 10. But at the same time, you've also got other options in case you want to be able to do just high levels of attacks in order to try to sneak in some wounds at Strength 3. So it's not a particularly fancy or flashy list. It's very difficult to find an Easterling army that is, but at least as regards how this one goes, it covers a lot of your bases all through one central support character.
This will be a killy army insofar as Easterlings are a killy army.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was kind of sad that I was unable to fit in a couple of Easterling captains in there with those hand-and-a-half axes, but this is the closest you can do at 450 points.
Yeah.
So, Tiberius, I believe you have a list regarding the Dark Marshal.
I do. So I have been a huge fan of the Dark Marshal for forever. So when I was looking at someone to build, I was like, I got to do the Marshal. I have the Dark Marshal on a horse. He is arguably very good on other beasts as well, but I think that in general you want the points.
Like fell beasts?
Like fell beasts. He's very good on a fell beast. Fell beasts are expensive at this particular point level, so I left that at home. You can choose to take one if you want. The banner radius gets bonkers huge if he's on a fell beast, and you can fly over the enemy line and instill fear towards your own guys in a staggered pattern, right? And so they'll be all spread out and not in a nice battle line as they move towards your guys.
Frozen.
And frozen in place.
And the back rank will be blocking their guys.
Surround them all. Mm-hmm. So there are huge benefits to taking the fell beast with him. At 450, I am not spending 170 points on one model. That is what it is. But I have surrounded the Dark Marshal with 3 Morgul Knights. Because Morgul Knights, they cause terror. Harbinger helps them. 5 Black Numenorians, because terror. And the Harbinger helps them. And 5 Moranon Orcs with shields and spears, because they can back up the Black Numenorians and help them with the one thing the Black Numenorians do not do, which is kill things. They can win fights, they can resist damage, but they have a really hard time killing things. You back them up with the Moranon Orcs, and suddenly everything is glorious and beautiful. When looking for the second warband to assist them, I immediately went to Kardish, because the number one problem with the Dark Marshal is that you run out of will very quickly. But we talked about Kardash last time, so I scrapped that plan, and instead went with the other person who synergizes with ringwraiths, which is the Captain of the Black Guard. The advantage that a normal ringwraith has over the Dark Marshal is that he has access to March. Well, the Captain of the Black Guard has March as well, and he's Courage 6. So long as the Dark Marshal stays on the board, that means you've got one Courage 6 hero on one side, one Courage 6 hero somewhere else. You've got this, right? I mean, the Courage part is not your problem. He is escorted by 5 Black Guards of Barad-dûr, because why not have some Strength 5 models in your army and back them up with the best spear models that you can get, which would be 5 more Mornon orcs with shields and spears. Altogether, this is 25 models, 4 of which are cavalry, for 444 points. You could eke out another, orc in there if you wanted, just to round it out to 450. But this, I think, is good, and it gives you 2 very solid 10-man infantry blocks, 5 files by 2 ranks, so they can anchor your line. You've got 3 Morgul Knights and the Dark Marshal for fast units that can hit objectives. If you're running Easterlings and you're not particularly fond of your cavalry, or if you're running Corsairs and you don't have access to any cavalry, this is a good contingent you can drop in somewhere. They can support each other, and if you need cavalry to run off the board or get to far objectives, you got it. And at 25 models, you should be able to push your total 600, 700, 800 point army well above 40 or 50 models, no matter what you're putting them in with.
So. Nice. And then to close this out, Wraithbird.
Okay, so I have built a list around the Betrayer. I sort of have 2 lists within one, sort of depending on how much you want to bulk stuff out. The Betrayer, of course, the big reason to take the Betrayer is to get the most that you can out of your poison, which means that if you're looking for numbers, the best spot to go is to stay very much within the Serpent Horde list. But if you wanted to, you could go Camel Riders direction, because they've got blowpipes, which is intriguing as well. I've decided to stay just in the Serpent Horde list, so I have the Betrayer. Unlike Tiberius, I thought, why not? You only get to live once. So I have mounted him on a Fell Beast, even though I worry very much that having the Betrayer on the Fell Beast, you're going to overextend with your will pool. You're going to be very tempted to fight. The Fell Beast does a couple of things for the Betrayer. One, it gives him a lot of mobility, so you can make sure that you get that 6-inch poison bubble where you need it, when you need it. A horse will generally do that for you, but it's a slightly larger bubble on the Fell Beast, and it's a little bit more maneuverable. The other major advantage that the Fell Beast offers over the horses we talked about last time is it offers you a very large meat shield
yes.
that is there between you and whatever is trying to shoot you. And so you've got that in your back pocket as well. It also creates a fairly large threat. And this is important, I think, for any army that wants to shoot at range. Most of the time, an army that shoots at range, you want to close with as soon as possible. This is especially true if you've got a very sort of what everybody would call a fragile army at range, which Harad certainly is. They top out generally at defense 4. What the Fell Beast does is it sort of encourages you to not charge, because if you do charge, there's a Fell Beast that could come at you, especially if you move first. Fell Beasts are very good. They are probably the best models still at setting up hurls, which will wreck an army that is charging you. The last thing that an army that's charging you wants is to be knocked prone when they are 8 inches away from you, because now they're going to take another round of shooting from your army at least, if not be charged by poison weapons and trapped on the ground. So I have included the Fell Beast. That's, of course, also to take advantage of Bane of Kings. You get the most out of your Bane of Kings if you're on the Fell Beast. That means I have put 170 points into a single model. This is a regular Fell Beast, not an armored Fell Beast. So for the rest of his warband, I've gone somewhat conservative, just 12 models out of the maximum of 15 that you could take with him. I have gone with 6 warriors of 6 regular Haradrim warriors. 2 of them have just spears, And then the other, no, that's not true. One of them has a spear, one of them has a bow. And then I've got 4 other Haradrim warriors with bows and spears. So we've got right there a contingent of 5 poison spears, 5 poison bows with arrows. Because Harad does have a 50% bow limit, but it is only 50%, so I got to get some other stuff. So I have also included 1 Haradrim raider who has the full kit, bow and war spear, so we're up to 6 bows, and then 1 serpent rider because the fight 4 is important. I also had the 2 cavalry guys because I figured that would be really nice to have the option to countercharge if you need it, and the mobility if you need it. And then 4 Watchers of Karna, all of them with the blades, the dual blades, the twin blades, so that they get 2 attacks, and they're also fight 4 as well. So that's that warband. If you go with just that warband by itself with the Betrayer on the Fell Beast with the 12 guys, all of whom have, I guess the Watchers of Karna don't have poison weapons, but everybody else does, all going to benefit. That's 238 points, 278 points. If you drop the Fell Beast and go with a regular horse, you free up another 40 points, which will get you 5 more models, so you can get, the full, close to the full warband. If you can max out the warband if you want for under right about 250 if you want that. If you wanted to go the full 450, which I think you would, because you'd want to take advantage. Right now we're at a relatively small poison contingent. We need to bulk these poison numbers. So I have added a Hasharin, or Hasharin, depending on how you pronounce it. This is not the most points-effective choice. A captain or a chieftain would be better. And, of course, if you had a chieftain, you'd have the Hero of Valor now, right? The king would give you the Hero of Valor, so you get even more spots. If you really wanted to bulk out the poison, that's probably where you go. But the Hasharin is fun. He's got a blow dart. He's got Bane of Kings, so he's got essentially his own sort of poison reroll, either with the blow dart at range or in combat through his own benefits. He sort of fits with the flavor. And I basically given him almost the exact same warband as the Betrayer has. So 1 serpent rider on horse, 1 Haradrim raider on horse with the war spear and the bow. Let's see, this is 2 Haradrim warriors with spears, 2 Haradrim warriors with bows and spears, and then 4 Watchers of Karna with the twin blades. So if you take the whole kit together, that's 22 warriors in total, 12 with the Betrayer, 10 with the Hasharin, 22 warriors plus the 2 heroes, 24 models for 450 points with quite a bit of poison. It's very fragile front rank, although the Watchers of Karna, if you ever get them into combat, are quite good. 2 attacks at fight 4. They're very cheap for what they do. They don't have poison, so they're not going to benefit from your master poisons, but 2 attacks to win the fight means you get to use extra, for your things. You got the Fell Beast plus the 4 cavalry models for some knockdown threat. Double dice to wound is always great, especially if you're rerolling all failed to wound rolls. And of course, you got the Betrayer making the whole thing go in the background.
So I have one quick question.
Yes.
Your choice of Watchers of Karna with the blades.
Yes.
Over Abrakan guards.
Correct.
Why?
2 attacks.
2 attacks.
That's what it is. It's purely for the 2 attacks.
Myself,
the burly strength 4 is very good. Neither of them have poison weapons unless you take the bows on the Watchers, which I didn't really want to do because you have the 50% bow limit. I was really looking for melee units who didn't have bows. The Watchers are very good in that respect. Serpent Guard could fill that role as well, especially if you wanted the fight 4. But I think for the same price, essentially, I think they're the same price. Serpent Guard might be 1 cheaper.
So is 1 cheaper.
Yeah, but the Watcher, the bonus attack, I would gladly pay 1 point to get 2 attacks. Yes. That's what it is. The Abrakan guards are very good. I think if you have to spam, and if you wanted to swap, they cost the same as the Watcher. So if you wanted to do a 50-50 split, you could do that. But I think if you have to err on one side or the other, go with the Watchers because the extra attacks are really, really good.
The +2 bonus to courage when charging terror models is also very nice.
Yes, that's
if you need to charge,
true.
Then That's going to come in very helpful.
On a base courage
On base
three, yes, they become courage 5. Yeah, that's true as well, and something that the Abracans, nothing really in the list would give you other than the Betrayer and the Hasharan. I expect have. Oh no, only courage 4. That's sort of surprisingly low, but that's okay. So yeah, so that's the list. It's again, if you're really trying to maximize what the Betrayer is doing, and you probably should. I think with the changes to the Haradrim King, where you can take 15, that's your best spot to bulk out the supporting warbands. But, the Hasharan is nice. A Hasharan will be able to deal with heroes, or at least tie up heroes, bigger heroes, much longer than the King would. And that's sort of the problem that this sort of gunline list has. Harad does not really have anybody who can go toe-to-toe with a big hero, especially if the Betrayer is not casting any magic, which you would try very hard not to do if you didn't have to. So the Hasharan they got Strike, they've got 3 Fate, they never count as trapped, they have Bane of Kings if you happen to win, they got Throwing Daggers, so you get a chance for a free cheeky wound on your way in. So they've got something at least. They can't do it for very long, but they can do it better than most of the other stuff that's in the list. Suladan, I suppose, could do it as well, but you really don't want to put Suladan in the position where he could be killed by a large hero, because he's doing a lot of the stuff for your army. So at big points, you would certainly, I think, strongly consider Suladan, because he's a very cheap way to get 18 more models with poison weapons into your army, and give them a 6-inch banner. And does he have a standfast as well?
I think so, yeah, and it's a 12-inch standfast.
Yeah, so with decent courage and good stats, and he's got Strike and March and get you where you need to go. So anyways, but that's a larger discussion for another time.
I don't know. I think if I was at a higher points level, I think I would just grab a Muma kill and throw a bunch of guys with poison up there. That's I think what I would do.
Yeah, I don't know that you're building a Betrayer list at that point. You could get an awful lot of poison weapons for 250 points. So, if the Mumak included 12 guys in the Howdah,
yes,
you would think about it. But it does not. It does not. Those guys are extra.
So, in any event, that's our podcast for today. I hope that you enjoyed it. We've really enjoyed putting these lists together and thinking through the best supports that are in the game. If you enjoyed this post, then definitely like, subscribe, share it with your friends, comment down below. You know how to use the interwebs, so go ahead and do what it is you're supposed to do with this particular medium. If you didn't enjoy it, tell us. You can comment down below, share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear what you think, and tell us a tale, great or small. To close us out, Tiberius, did you have a word, anything you want to share with us?
I do. This is not as well kitted to the discussion as our last one was, but shielding will never win you a Lords of Battle game.
So I'm gonna slightly push back on this.
Oh no! This is not planned.
Okay, here's how it goes. Are you ready? So if you run Thorin's Company, and you shield with Thorin, and you use that to get wounds, and you are able to avoid taking wounds because you're running a bunch of high fight value undercosted dwarves, you might win.
You might win.
You
might win, but at that point, most of your models are not shielding. So, the point, of course, for those of you who don't understand the joke in this, is Lords of Battle is a scenario that's won by how many wounds you deal, and most models are not able to do anything if they shield. Shielding is a very common strategy for most new players because it gets you those extra dice and it keeps your guys alive. But you cannot use it in all scenarios in order to win. So,
and experienced players too.
Experienced players
I still shield almost half the time.
But yes, not a great offensive strategy.
Yeah. So there you go. Some wisdom.
All right.
From us.
Ciao.